Chapter 43:10. I'm fine. Infengwu's face was dark. Although he said he was fine, his eyes were filled with unconcealable sorrow. Tian did not say anything else, but he knew very well why Infengwu admitted defeat. What Infengwu measured was not his personal gains and losses, but something more important than the overall situation. He had already sensed Lin Fan's killing intent from his battle with Lin Fan. Therefore, if he were to continue fighting, the best outcome would be for him to be injured or even killed. Once he was injured, would he and Tian be able to leave the Yellow Springs Holy Land alive? The human emperor was in the extreme heavens, but he was not a benevolent and righteous person. Even if Tian won the bet, the human emperor would only not attack Rui Qinyu, but he could keep Infengwu and Tian in the Yellow Springs Holy Land forever. Infengwu had considered this, which was why he chose to admit defeat. Otherwise, he would not have taken the risk of comprehending the sword for the second time. What he put down was his dignity as a swordsman, and what he picked up was his and Tian's chance of survival. Then, the battle continued. Tian soon faced his own battle and stepped onto the sword pillar. The person standing opposite him was none other than the master of Chunjian Villa, Tang Baiming. Little junior brother, we are really fated. Tang Baiming's face was dark, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. He was obviously looking forward to the battle with Tian. Yeah, Tian said with a faint smile. He could easily guess that his opponents had all been arranged beforehand, but he did not expect to meet Tang Baiming so early. I will not hold back against you. I hope you do not care about us being in the same sect. Just attack. Tang Baiming was extremely gloomy. Sword intent surged around him, like a ferocious beast lurking in the void, ready to deliver a fatal blow at the next moment. You think too much. Tianling laughed. He was not in the same sect as Tang Baiming. If that is the case, then I can rest assured. Tang Baiming took a step forward, and instantly his sword intent erupted, crisscrossing in the air like a stampede of 10,000 beasts. An invisible killing wall formed from his sword intent appeared, sealing off all directions. In the blink of an eye, Tian felt the pressure in the space around him multiply, causing him to feel as if his breathing had stopped. This was the first time he had personally experienced the 9-kill sword will, and it was indeed terrifying. The overwhelming killing intent was enough to destroy a swordsman's will to fight. It was no wonder that the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart had almost lost its life against Tang Baiming. Outside the battlefield, several pairs of eyes were locked onto Tian and Tang Baiming. Tang Baiming, don't disappoint me. Human Emperor's eyes darkened, and he looked extremely cold. Beside him, Lin Fan stood with his hands behind his back. He had a playful look on his face as he muttered, Tian, let me see just how strong you have become. Up until now, Tian had yet to draw his sword in the Yellow Spring struggle. Lin Fan very much wanted to know how powerful Tian's battle prowess was. The stronger Tian was, the more his fighting spirit would be aroused, and the more interested he would be. On the other side, Infengwu and the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart were also watching this battle, especially Infengwu. He was obviously more concerned, because the two people on the battlefield were close to him. According to Tian's previous performance, if he was facing an ordinary swordsman, Infengwu would not have the slightest bit of loyalty. But now that Tian was facing Tang Baiming, it was very different. Infengwu had just fought with Tang Baiming and knew how strong the latter was. If they were in the same realm, he would not be a match for Tang Baiming. Although Tang Baiming had suppressed his strength to the 9th level of Sword Heavenly Tribulation, he was still much stronger than Tian, who was in the 4th level of Sword Heavenly Tribulation. If they were in the same realm, Infengwu believed that Tian had a higher chance of winning. But now, it seemed that Tang Baiming had a higher chance of winning. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was a little nervous. He had just lost to Tang Baiming, and the 9-kill sword intent had almost taken his life. Facing such a strong opponent, could Tian block it? On top of the sword pillar, Tian frowned. Then, he unsheathed the sky, sword on his back. With a loud sword cry, the killing wall was forced back several meters. Your sword is not bad, but you are too weak. Tang Baiming felt the killing wall shaking, and his eyes flashed fiercely. Today you are destined to die under the 9 kills sword intent. But yet Tion was fearless. His long sword swept across the sky, and the roar of the gods and demons caused the void to tremble. Tang Biming frowned. He didn't expect Tion's sword intent to be so terrifying. But he quickly calmed down and released the sword intent around him again, strengthening the killing wall. Tion immediately felt the sword pressure around him increase, but his expression didn't change in the slightest. It was as calm as the still water in an ancient well. Die! In the next moment, Tang Biming didn't hesitate anymore. He roared and his long sword pierced through the sky, condensing the 9 kill sword intent into an extremely sharp sword shadow that rushed towards Tion. I only need one sword to defeat you. At the same time, Tion murmured. The sky sword pierced through the void, and the moment the sword intent of the gods and demons burst forth, the sword light bloomed and directly tore the killing wall apart. Bang! Then, the two sword shadows collided, causing the void to tremble and the heaven and earth to tremble. Boom, 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 boom. Following that, an unstoppable force erupted and the killing wall instantly collapsed. An all-encompassing force came crashing down and Tang Biming's vision darkened. His entire body was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. The whole place was dead silent. Only the sound of the sword intent colliding could be heard, like the roar of thunder. After a long time, everyone's eyes were focused on the young man in white on the sword pillar. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. No one could believe that Tion had defeated Tang Biming with a single strike of his sword. This is impossible. A furious roar came from the void below. Tang Biming's body was trembling, and his whole body was covered in blood. It looked very tragic, but no matter how unwilling and angry he was, he had to accept the fact that he had lost. A crushing defeat. With just one sword strike, he was defeated by Tion. Tion didn't even look at him. His figure moved, and he directly jumped down from the sword pillar. In the void far away, Human Emperor's face was livid. It was obvious that he was suppressing his anger. In fact, he had seen Tion's previous battles, and he more or less expected Tang Biming's defeat. But he didn't think that Tang Biming would be defeated so easily. He had to admit that he had underestimated Tion. At this moment, he couldn't help but worry if Lin Fan was 100% confident against Tion. Chapter 43:11. Tion came to In Fengwu's side. In Fengwu was overjoyed, and his huge body was shaking. He had never imagined that Tion would be so strong that he could defeat Tang Biming with a single strike. Tion smiled faintly, but he felt a little regretful. If his strength had reached the 9th level of sword heavenly tribulation, or if Tang Biming had suppressed his cultivation to the same level as him, then that strike, just now, would have most likely killed Tang Biming. Now, he had only injured Tang Biming, and he had missed a good opportunity to kill him. After all, Tang Biming was most likely an elder of the Human Emperor's palace. The 4th round of battles ended quickly, and there were only 13 people left. Among them, those that Tion cared about were Mori Shire, Human Emperor, Lin Fan, Lung Huang Jishue, and the one-armed swordsman with a mask. Although Yu Jingchen had the innate sword embryo body, he was too weak, so he did not enter the 5th round. And Yu Jingchen was defeated by the one-armed swordsman. Tion had already noticed the one-armed swordsman. The latter's sword intent was a little strange. It was not like an ordinary swordsman's, but an extremely rare ice-attributed sword intent. Among the advanced swordsmen, Mori Shire was the one that Tion did not want to encounter the most, followed by Lung Huang Jishue. As for Human Emperor and Lin Fan, they would have to fight sooner or later anyway. Tion could accept it no matter when they encountered each other. After a while, the 13 swordsmen finished drawing lots. This time, Human Emperor was lucky. He became the one who advanced without fighting. The remaining 12 people fought in pairs. 6. Tion looked at the number on the lot in his hand, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at the sword pillar on the 6th battlefield, and there was already a swordsman standing there. It's this guy. When he saw that person's face, Niet Tion's heart tightened, and he cursed inwardly. He never expected that his opponent would be Mori Shire. Mori Shire was the opponent that he did not want to encounter the most. Oh no! Infeng Wua glanced at Niet Tion's battle lot, and his face darkened. The son of Yellow Springs was an invincible existence in a Yellow Springs holy land. How could Niet Tion be his match? It was obvious that this was arranged by the human emperor. He wanted to use Mori Shire to eliminate Niet Tion. Despicable. Infeng looked at the human sovereign with a cold heart and gritted his teeth. Let's fight. Niet Tion took a deep breath and decided to face it calmly. He had fought with Mori Shire before, and he did not think that the latter was difficult to deal with. However, in the Yellow Springs Holy Land, Mori Shire could mobilize the power of the entire world, which was too terrifying. Mori Shire was also surprised to see Niet Tion appear. He couldn't help but smile and said, I didn't expect it to be you. Didn't you want to kill me? Now, the opportunity has come. Niet Tion smiled bitterly, but he was not afraid. I want to kill you, but not now, because your life is still useful to me. Mori Shire playfully smiled and said, I know you can't lose this battle, because your opponent shouldn't be me. But you should also know that here, you're not. Maybe you can beat me. What do you want to do? Just say it. Niet Tion's eyes darkened as he said coldly, I'll give you a chance. As long as you're willing to take a palm strike from me, I'll admit defeat. Mori Shire smiled again and said indifferently, A palm strike? Niet Tion frowned. His mind spun rapidly. He had no idea what Mori Shire wanted to do. Yes, just one palm, and I promise I won't kill you. Mori Shire's eyes surged with a strange light, and he had a patient attitude. Okay, let's do it. Niet Tion thought for a moment and agreed readily. He knew that he was not Mori Shire's opponent, so he might as well compromise. Of course, he knew that Mori Shire's palm strike was not simple, but his martial body was also not simple. Not to mention Mori Shire, even he himself did not have a thorough understanding of his own martial body. Therefore, he was confident that no matter what Mori Shire was planning, his martial body could withstand it. Niet Tion, you're smarter than I thought. Mori Shire obviously did not expect Niet Tion to agree so decisively. The corner of his mouth curled up into a smile, and then he directly struck with his palm. A strange black light shot out and directly entered Niet Tion's body. Niet Tion's body trembled slightly, and he suddenly felt a strange power flowing in his body, instantly surging throughout his body. The next moment, under the impact of this power, Niet Tion actually felt his whole body tighten, as if there was an invisible hand, instantly grasping his internal organs and the hundreds of extraordinary meridians. What's going on? Niet Tion was shocked and looked at Mori Shire. Don't worry, the power I left in your body is called the vein sealing restriction. It won't take your life. Mori Shire smiled indifferently, and then his figure flashed, directly jumping down from the sword pillar. Niet Tion's face was cold and solemn. He took a deep breath, and only then did he feel that the power in his body had weakened. Mori Shire's move seemed to be to control Niet Tion. Unfortunately, Niet Tion was never a puppet that could be manipulated by others. The judge on the side was stunned, and after a long time, he announced Niet Tion's victory. Niet Tion, are you okay? As Niet Tion walked down from the sword pillar, Infeng Wua, Scarlet Life, Dan Xin, and the others walked over and asked nervously. I'm fine. Niet Tion smiled indifferently, as if he didn't care. Since Mori Shire had no intention of killing him, the vein sealing restriction would at least not affect him for now. However, what would happen to the vein sealing restriction in the future was hard to say. Ren Huang did not expect the battle between Niet Tion and Mori Shire to end like this. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and a murderous intent was revealed. On the other hand, Lin Fan looked happy. He did not want Niet Tion to be defeated by Mori Shire. He wanted a real battle with the latter. However, it was also a good thing that Mori Shire took the initiative to be eliminated. There was no need to worry about him ruining things. Next, the fifth round of battles ended quickly, and there were only 7 winners left. They were Ren Huang, Lin Fan, Nie Tian, Lung Huang Jishue, the one-armed swordsman, the master of Heaven Prison Sword Pavilion, Lin Teng, and a young swordsman called Qinju. Then, they continued to draw lots. It was unknown whether it was Lung Huang Jishue's luck or Ren Huang's intention, but Lung Huang Jishue drew an empty lot and directly advanced to the next round. The remaining 6 people fought in pairs. Nietan drew the third lot, and his opponent was not Ren Huang, nor was it Lin Fan, but the strange one-armed swordsman. 2 figures directly stepped on the sword pillar, and the sword intent around them rose like fire, causing the surrounding heaven and earth to shake. Chapter 43:12. The one-armed swordsman gave Nie Tian an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He felt like an old friend, but he could not remember where he had seen him before. Nie Tian, you are a peerless genius. Out of everyone I have ever met, you are the most talented. The one-armed swordsman spoke in a deep voice. His voice was a little hoarse, as if he had known Nie Tian for a long time. He then said coldly, "But this battle, I must win. Do we know each other?" Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He was even more surprised. His opponent was wearing a mask and only had one arm. He really could not remember who he was. "Make your move." The one-armed swordsman did not answer Nie Tian. Instead, he spoke coldly. Then, a strange-looking black bone sword appeared in his hand. Immediately, a gust of terrifying, ghostly chi permeated the air. Nie Tian's expression changed slightly as he unsheathed the sky sword. The opponent he was facing right now was a swordsman who could summon the cry of the sky. And the cry of the sky was even stronger than his. Of course, he did not dare to be careless. "Die!" The one-armed swordsman growled. His silhouette flashed, and the bone sword in his hand slashed down. The sword chi of ice and frost covered the sky, as if it was going to freeze everything. Nie Tian's silhouette flickered, and he slashed out with his sword. In the blink of an eye, he felt a gust of frigid chi enter his body and spread throughout his entire body. Around his body, a thin layer of ice formed. Shocked, Nie Tian used his chi of the devil and God to expel the frigid chi. He did not think that the one-armed swordsman would be this powerful. The first attack had already caught him off guard. The surrounding swordsmen were all shocked. Just who is this ghostly swordsman? How can he be so powerful? Even the leader of the Chun Jian Villa was defeated by Nie Tian with one attack. This ghostly swordsman was able to repel Nie Tian with one attack. Unbelievable. The sword intent of the ghostly swordsman is so unique. Amidst the frost, there is bloodlust and ghostly chi. He should be from the ghost race. The crowd discussed, and their eyes became excited. They were looking forward to a breathtaking battle. In Fengwu looked at Nie Tian worriedly. He had been too concerned about Nie Tian and had not paid much attention to this ghost-faced swordsman. He did not expect the latter to be so fierce. This person has triggered the cry of heaven from the monument of Yellow Spring. It seems that he is a formidable opponent of Nie Tian. The Scarlet Life, Dan Hart, was worried and said nervously. On the sword pillar, Nie Tian steadied himself. His eyes darkened, and a fiend god inverse mark appeared at the corner of his eyes. Against such an expert, only by using his god-fiend body would he have a chance of winning. "Very well, let me see your true strength." Ghostface roared like thunder, and a strange pitch-black color appeared in his eyes. He slashed out furiously with his sword, and the sword intent was boundless. The surging force pressed down violently, as if it wanted to crush this world. Nie Tian suddenly felt a huge pressure on his head, and he was shocked once again. The strength of this ghost-faced swordsman was much stronger than he had expected. However, he was not afraid. He swung his sword in the sky, and the sword intent soared into the sky. The sword shadow was like a giant dragon that rose against the sky and forcibly blocked the surging sword intent. Bang! The moment the two forces collided, a muffled sound rang out, and the world shook. Then, endless waves rolled out like a landslide and a tsunami. Nie Tian retreated rapidly, and the sword pillar under his feet was stamped with his footprints. However, the sword intent of the ghost-faced swordsman seemed to be endless, and the surging sword intent was about to engulf him. You want to kill me with just this? You are too naive. And yet Tion steadied himself, and the fiend god sword intent in his body burst out. Combined with the star bloodline, the sword intent was monstrous, and with a loud bang, it directly broke through the huge waves in front of him. Then, he slashed wildly at the ghost-faced swordsman. At this moment, on his body, the celestial devil inverse mark burst out, and the god-fiend body was completely activated. Ha ha, this is the Tion I know. The ghost-faced swordsman was not afraid at all. Instead, he laughed crazily. His bone sword broke through the sky and blocked the sword shadow. Then, he drew a black line in the air and counterattacked Tion. Tion retreated immediately, and a deep sword wound appeared on his shoulder. It is indeed Ghost Chi. He steadied himself, and was shocked to see that the sword wound on his shoulder was emitting black ghost chi. At that moment, he once again felt that the ghost-faced swordsman was very familiar, but he could not figure out the identity of the ghost-faced swordsman. Tion, let's see whether your celestial devil body or my ghost martial body is stronger. In the void, an arrogant voice sounded. The ghost-faced swordsman stood on the sword pillar like a mountain, and his body was surrounded by extremely terrifying ghost chi. Ghost martial body. Tion's eyes trembled, and he saw that the ghost chi was surging around the ghost-faced swordsman's body. Through his clothes, he could clearly see that his body was covered with black runes, which were somewhat similar to the celestial devil inverse mark. It seemed that the ghost martial body was a kind of bloodline power similar to the celestial devil body, and it did not seem to be weaker than the celestial devil body. Who is this person? Tion was even more confused. A few names flashed through his mind, but he quickly rejected them. He really couldn't think of anyone he knew who had such power. But the familiar feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Ghost martial body, ice frost dance. At this moment, the ghost-faced swordsman moved, and he used a strange footwork. The ghost chi around him became more and more intense, and the surrounding void was about to collapse. Tion suddenly felt threatened, and his expression changed slightly. He moved his feet, and the sword formation was activated. The surrounding sword shadows appeared again, and the power of the stars was integrated into it. It was dazzling, but extremely murderous. Very good. The ghost-faced swordsman laughed maniacally and slashed out with his sword. Boundless sword intent condensed into a gigantic ghost shadow in the air, and with a loud rumble, it directly pressed down on Tion. At the same time, Tion also made his move. The 12 sword shadows moved at the same time and instantly condensed into a gigantic sword shadow, forcibly resisting the ghost shadow in the air. Rumble! In the next instant, the two terrifying forces collided, and the void suddenly stagnated. The space was pulled taut by the tremendous force, and it was as though it was about to be torn apart. The strength of the two were almost equal, and both of them retreated at the same time. But at this moment, a strange scene occurred. On the face of the ghost shadow, the two eye sockets that were like two abysses suddenly trembled, and the next moment, two beams of black light whizzed out and instantly attacked. In an instant, Tion felt an oppressive, killing intent. His countenance changed, and the astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he instantly dodged half a meter to the side. Pooh! Pooh! In the next instant, the black light swept past, and the sound of two flesh being torn apart rang out. Tion's left shoulder was pierced, and there was a deep wound on his neck, and blood was gushing out incessantly. If he hadn't dodged to the side, he would have become a headless corpse. He didn't expect that the ghost shadow was actually just a feint, and the real killing intent was the ghost shadow's eyes. Ghost eyes! Tion forcibly stabilized his body in the air, and his eyes were filled with shock. Chapter 43:13. The Eye of the Ghost Eye, the Tang Clan. Tion's pupils constricted. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, but he was certain that the power released by the ghostly shadow came from the eye of the ghost eye. Could it be that this one-armed man was from the Tang clan? Or did he have the same bloodline as the Tang clan? But how is that possible? The power of bloodline was passed down through the bloodline. The most it could be was similar, but it could not be the same. Familiarity? Inexplicable energy? In the next second, Nie Tian suddenly realized something. His face changed color as he stared at the ghost swordsman on top of the sword pillar. He uttered word by word. "Who the hell are you? You finally remembered?" The ghost swordsman snickered. Though his face couldn't be seen, his laughter was like that of a demon. Unconsciously, one could imagine a hideous face. He said in a creepy voice, "You're not sure that your energy is feeling. You still don't have the guts to admit it or say my name. You can't be him." Nie Tian's eyes seemed to be burning with flames as he let out a bellow. Sword intent surged madly from all over his body, condensing into streaks of white light that shot towards the ghost chi in the surroundings. "Can't be who?" The ghost-faced swordsman said in a playful tone. "You still can't say the name Tang 13. Tang 13. Nie Tian's pupils quivered like lightning. Just now, the name that popped up in his head was Tang 13. But how could he believe that the person before him was Tang 13? Tang 13, the young man who was like the sun. How could he be the evil ghost swordsman before him? Nie Tian, I know you are in shock and have a lot of questions. The ghost swordsman snickered. But if you want answers to your questions, you have to defeat me first. As soon as his voice trailed off, his silhouette flickered and his ghostly body turned into shadows. Like a ghost, he dashed towards Nie Tian one step at a time. Nie Tian's gaze flickered, and he forced himself to calm down. The sword intent around him was like the sea, surging violently. 8 barren sword slash. The sky sword let out an earth-shattering sword cry. Its sword chi soared into the sky and rushed towards the ghost-faced swordsman. "You want to kill me with just this? What a joke." The ghost-faced swordsman sneered. In the blink of an eye, a sword shadow shot out like a silk thread, cutting through the surging sword waves. Nie Tian's eyes trembled violently, and he immediately retreated. In the next instant, he felt a chill on his neck. A sword mark fell, almost cutting his neck off. How can this guy's sword intent be so strong? Stabilizing his body, Nie Tian's eyes trembled in shock at the ghost-faced swordsman's strength. "Nie Tian, are you afraid? Are you afraid that I am really Tang 13? The ghost-faced swordsman laughed wildly, as if he was trying to stimulate Nie Tian's desire to fight. Nie Tian's face was dark and murderous. He kept telling himself that the person before him was not Tang 13. However, when he attacked, he still held back. His rationality told him that even if this person wasn't Tang 13, they were closely related to each other. Then, the ghost-faced swordsman continued to attack. Every time his sword landed, it left a glaring sword mark on Nie Tian's body. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian had turned into a man of blood. Outside of the pillar, the spectators were in an uproar. What is going on? Why is Nie Tian being suppressed all of a sudden? That ghost-faced swordsman seems to be saying something that is making Nie Tian nervous. Could it be that they know each other from before? It seems like Nie Tian is afraid of the ghost-faced swordsman. As the crowd discussed, they couldn't help but feel disappointed. They wanted to see an exciting battle. If it was like Nie Tian, then it would be too boring. Nie Tian, what are you doing? Why are you distracted at a time like this? Is there anything more important than the Empress? Infeng looked worried. He didn't know what Nie Tian was doing. He could tell that the ghost-faced swordsman was strong, but he couldn't make Nie Tian unable to fight back. This ghost-faced swordsman actually has the aura of an astral soul in his body. Could he be a star venerate? The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart felt that something was wrong and guessed. Actually, he wasn't sure if the ghost-faced swordsman was a star venerate. Only when the ghost-faced swordsman attacked with his full power could his aura vaguely carry traces of an astral soul. However, if he was a star venerate, why would he make things difficult for Nie Tian? On the sword pillar, Nie Tian's body was covered in blood, but his eyes were still sharp and murderous. His injuries looked serious, but in reality, they were only flesh wounds and not fatal. Nie Tian, I know your injuries are not serious. Why don't you show us your true strength, and let's have a good fight?" The ghost-faced swordsman said sinisterly. His eyes were surging with a dark light. He no longer had any scruples and directly showed the ghost eyes in front of Nyation. "Before, I want to know, who are you?" Nyation's figure was like a sword, red and murderous. "Humph." The ghost-faced swordsman sneered and said, "It's simple. Defeat me, and you will know who I am." "All right, as you wish." Nyation let out a bellow as he took a step forward. The blood on his body was washed away, and his aura was restored, as if he were a monarch descending upon the world. At this moment, the astral bloodline in his body was released. Waves of powerful astral energy flowed in his body like a river, pushing his martial body to an extremely terrifying state. Interesting. The ghost-faced swordsman's eyes were like poison. He could clearly hear the sound of blood flowing in Nyation's body, which made him feel inexplicably excited. This was the Nyation he wanted to see. Ghost warrior blood cry. At the same time, the ghost-faced swordsman took a step forward. Under the enormous pressure, a crack appeared on the sword pillar under his feet. All of a sudden, the ghost-like chi around him surged violently, making ear-piercing noises as if thousands of ghosts were wailing. And within his body, the power of the ghost martial technique erupted, emitting crackling sounds. After that, his body underwent a terrifying transformation. His entire body grew a lot taller, and his limbs became thick and powerful, just like a gorilla. Seeing this, Nyation's eyes darkened. From the ghost-faced swordsman, he sensed an extremely horrifying energy and extreme physical strength. "Nyation, what you're seeing now is the real ghost warrior's body. This is the power of the ghost eyes." The ghost-faced swordsman laughed and said arrogantly, "What Tang 13 couldn't do, I did for him." "You really are not Tang 13. Nyation roared like thunder. He released the astral bloodline, which formed a faint layer of starlight around his body. It was like a shield, giving him a sense of holiness. Chapter 43:14. Ghost Warrior, step on mountains and rivers. High up in the sky, the ghost warrior let out a cold roar, which sounded like a dragon's roar. Suddenly, the surging ghost chi around him exploded, shaking heaven and earth. In the midst of the ghost chi, the horrifying ghost shadow appeared once again. With a step, it directly pressed down on Nyation, as if it wanted to directly crush him. "You want to kill me with just this? How naive." Nyation's eyes were like a god's. The sword of sky in his hand revolved, and the brilliance of the sword spread out like a waterfall, one after another, incomparably dazzling. But everyone could see that within this dazzling brilliance, there was a huge amount of power and endless killing intent. Everyone's eyes trembled, and even their breathing was tense. They did not want to miss any wonderful scene. At this moment, the real battle between Nyation and the ghost-faced swordsman had begun, and this battle was more terrifying than they had imagined. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, the ghost shadow stepped down, stepping on each of the sword shadows, and suddenly there was an earth-shattering sound. In between, every time the ghost shadow stepped on a sword shadow, its figure would shrink a little. And in the end, after dozens of sword shadows had all been stepped on, the ghost shadow had also shrunk to a few meters tall and was completely no longer a threat to Nyation. The crowd was shocked, and they could not believe their eyes. These two guys are too terrifying. Their sword essences are similar, but they can actually fight to such an extent. They're competing with each other's strength. Doesn't that mean that in the end, whoever is stronger and lasts longer will be the one to win? I don't think so. Although the ghost-faced swordsman is currently unable to suppress Nyation, he is still slightly stronger. If Nyation only has this much strength, then the one who will be defeated in the end will definitely be him. As the crowd discussed, their nerves were stretched taut, and they did not even dare to breathe loudly. And in the distant sky, there were several pairs of eyes staring at the sword pillars, each with a different expression. This brat actually possesses such strength to be able to fight against the ghost martial artist to such an extent. It seems like I've misjudged him. The human emperor's face was gloomy. He couldn't help but feel that he had misjudged him. Back then, when he and Infenghua made a bet using Nie Tian and Lin Fan, he didn't put Nie Tian in his eyes at all. He thought that Nie Tian was just a talented swordsman. Even if Nie Tian had inherited Dong Wangjingrong's star origin stone, he was still far from being able to defeat Lin Fan. Fan's opponent. One had to know that Dong Wangjingrong, at his peak, did not even have the right to ask a Ren Huang to help him. Therefore, why would he care about Nie Tian? Moreover, the human emperor's palace had gotten the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion to take action against the Ten Destruction Great Empress. They did not see Nie Tian as a threat at all. However, things were different now. Ren Huang's heart was filled with all sorts of emotions. He had previously admitted that he had underestimated Nie Tian's strength. However, he was moved again now because he had underestimated Nie Tian. Based on the strength that Nie Tian had displayed now, he was strong enough to be Lin Fan's opponent. Moreover, he might really be a threat to Lin Fan. No matter who wins or loses, this guy must not be left alive. Thinking of this, a fierce look flashed in the human emperor's eyes. He immediately listed Nie Tian as a person that the human emperor's palace had to eliminate. Not far away from him, Lin Fan's expression changed slightly. He was no longer as relaxed as before. At this moment, the importance of Nie Tian in his heart had quietly changed. Previously, he had looked at Nie Tian as a hunter. In his eyes, Nie Tian was just a prey. Therefore, when the prey was too weak, so weak that he could kill him with a single blow, he really did not have any interest in it. When he realized that this prey had some strength, he was naturally delighted. But at this moment, he realized that this prey wasn't just any ordinary strong. It was strong enough to threaten him, the hunter. This kind of change was like a hunter going hunting. At first, he thought that he was hunting a rabbit and was inevitably disappointed. Later, he found out that he was hunting an antelope and was naturally delighted. Later, he found out that he was hunting a wolf or even a ferocious tiger. Fear. Nie Tian, even if you're a dragon, you'll still have to obediently submit to me. However, Lin Fan was a young human emperor after all, and he quickly calmed down. His eyes became incomparably sinister, and traces of cold light surged in them. He was like a man-eating, ferocious beast. Even though Nie Tian was strong, Lin Fan was not a weakling either. He still had 80% confidence that he could defeat Nie Tian easily. Even if he couldn't defeat Nie Tian, he was confident that he wouldn't be defeated by Nie Tian. This was because he possessed a power that Nie Tian absolutely could not defeat. Therefore, in the battle between him and Nie Tian, the worst outcome would be a draw. Thinking of this, Lin Fan was as calm as ever. In addition to the sinister look in his eyes, there was also an unshakable confidence. On the other side, Infenghua's eyes lit up. He seemed a little excited and a little worried. He had underestimated Nie Tian's strength, and he had even underestimated the strength of the ghost-faced swordsman. He originally thought that Nie Tian could defeat the ghost-faced swordsman without being injured. But now, it seemed that it was unknown whether Nie Tian could win or not. The most troublesome thing was that, with the intensity of the battle at this time, even if Nie Tian won, it would definitely be a Pyrrhic victory. To kill 800 of the enemy, he would lose 1,000 of his own. If Nie Tian won, but was seriously injured, or even had only 20% to 30% of his strength left, how could he fight with the young human emperor? The Yellow Spring struggle would not give you time to rest. In order to win, the young human emperor would definitely not let Nie Tian rest. Nie Tian might have a chance to fight with Lin Fan in his peak state, but Nie Tian, who was injured and weak, could not defeat Lin Fan no matter what. This was why Infenghua was so anxious. He was so anxious that both sides of his fat face were deeply sunken. However, the Scarlet Life loyal heart beside him was shocked, as if he had discovered something incredible. This person is really a Star Lord. The Scarlet Life loyal heart finally could not stand it anymore. His eyes trembled as he said in a daze. Moreover, he is a very powerful Star Lord, the double absolute Star Soul Wings, the killing vanquishing wolf. The more intense the battle between Yetion and the ghost-faced swordsman, the more power the ghost-faced swordsman revealed, and the stronger the Star Lord aura in his body. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart could not believe that what he sensed was actually one of the double absolute Star Souls, the killing vanquishing wolf. Among all the Star Lords, the double absolute Star Souls were second only to the Lonely Sky Star Lord. As for the Lonely Sky Star Lord, he was almost the same as the Starry Sky Holy Lord. However, the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart vaguely remembered that the killing vanquishing wolf was an extremely young martial artist and seemed to be a close friend of Yetion, called 13. Tang 13. The next moment, the Crimson Life Loyal Heart suddenly remembered, and its mouth opened into a circle. It was sluggish and could not close it again. At this time, he finally understood why Yetion was so afraid when he attacked. It turned out that the person he was facing was his best friend. At the same time, on the sword pillar, Yetion and the ghost-faced swordsman had already exchanged dozens of moves. Even though both of them had strong martial bodies, they could not help but feel a little breathless. The killing vanquishing wolf Star Soul, who are you? At this time, Yetion also sensed the aura of the killing vanquishing wolf Star Soul. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he wanted to eat someone. If the ghost I could not confirm that the person in front of him was Tang 13, then with the killing vanquishing wolf Star Soul, it was certain. Chapter 43:15. With the addition of the ghost-eyed astral soul, Yetion was absolutely certain that the person in front of him was Tang 13. However, whether or not Tang 13's soul was in his body, he had no idea. You've seen through me. The ghost-faced swordsman coldly laughed. Yetion, if I said I'm Tang 13, would you believe me? You're not him. Yetion's countenance was as heavy as killing intent. Who exactly are you? Where's the real Tang 13? I've already said, if you defeat me, you'll naturally know the truth. The ghost-faced swordsman laughed maniacally. His body transformed into a specter as he slashed out with his sword. Like a phantom of the night, countless sword shadows shot out, akin to 10,000 horses galloping towards Qin Wentian. What a terrifying sword! The spectators' countenances changed as they exclaimed in shock. After such a long and intense battle, the ghost-faced swordsman's sword didn't show any signs of weakening. On the contrary, it seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. Could it be that the ghost-faced swordsman had an inexhaustible amount of energy within his body? Pong! In the air, Yetion slashed out with his sword, splitting apart the countless sword shadows. However, his entire body was forced back by the ferocious sword attacks. The injuries on his body became more and more obvious. The human emperor's gaze sank as his heart turned cold. Little brat, no matter how strong you are, there's still a limit. But as a ghost, the more you fight, the stronger you become. I really want to see how long you can last. He could sense that Yetion's strength was already at its limit. But the ghost-faced swordsman had an inexhaustible amount of energy. Then, even if he dragged it out slowly, he would still be able to kill Yetion. Am I going to lose? Lin Fan furrowed his brows, his gaze complicated. He hoped that Yetion would lose, but at the same time, he didn't. He hoped that it was because Yetion was already a threat to him. If he lost, he would naturally have one less opponent to fight against. He didn't hope that it was because he hadn't truly fought against Yetion yet. What pity. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and Yin Fenghua both felt their hearts in their throats. This was especially so for Yin Fenghua. His eyes were staring straight ahead, and his palms were covered in cold sweat. He knew better than anyone what kind of calamity it would be for the ghost race if Yetion lost. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was more worried about the safety of Yetion. At the same time, he also wanted to know the true identity of the ghost-faced swordsman. Yetion, this battle is over. Accept the consequences of your defeat. Ghost-faced swordsman let out a low roar while the sword chi on his entire body surged. His ghost-faced martial body actually grew slightly explosively once more, and then a monstrous aura surged around him. Surprisingly, it was annihilation. The power of a wolf. Nietan, the ghost-faced swordsman said in a loud voice. With your current strength, even if you open your god-devil body, you can only barely resist my ghost warrior body. If you add the power of my killing vanquishing wolf to the mix, can you still stop me? An extremely terrifying, oppressive aura. Nietion's gaze was as deep as water, without the slightest trace of fear. Ghost warrior, mountain break. Then, the ghost-faced swordsman's figure moved. His sword was like a dragon, and a terrifying aura erupted, as if it was going to crush the world. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but gasp. Their shock was beyond words. It was hard to imagine that the ghost-faced swordsman could actually burst out such a terrifying power at the 9th level of the Sword Heaven's tribulation. Even some high-level heavenly perception Saint Emperors might not be able to withstand such a sword. How could Nietion, a mere Saint King of the 4th Heaven's tribulation, block this sword? Ren Huang's eyes flickered with passion. He couldn't wait to see the scene of Nietion being killed. What a pity. Lin Fan shook his head and sighed, but his eyes were still calm. He didn't expect the ghost-faced swordsman to be so ferocious. No matter how amazing Nietion was, he would definitely die if this sword fell. Because Lin Fan felt that even if it was him, he would also have to pay a considerable price to take this sword. High up in the sky, Nie Tianling stood there, his silver hair fluttering like snow, the sword intent around him like the sea. His eyes were extremely calm, without a trace of panic. Just at the moment when the majestic sword shadow was about to fall, his figure finally moved. His eyes suddenly opened, and the demon eye and divine punishment reverse were activated at the same time. An unparalleled power rushed to the martial body, and the celestial demon inverse mark actually grew like a strong branch. In an instant, it covered his whole body. 3 powers returned to 1, heaven and earth stability. The corner of his mouth twitched, and his deep voice was filled with coldness. Like a judge, the sword in the sky fell from the sky, and the sword shadow was like white silk, cutting through the void. Bang! In the next moment, the 2 sword shadows finally collided, and an earth-shaking sound burst out, and the surrounding space was silent. Boom, 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 bang, 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 chi, chi, chi. What followed was the sound of the impact of the terrifying power. The peerless sword wave exploded from the center of the collision and spread in all directions, as if there were tens of thousands of beasts galloping in the raging waves. Nietion and the ghost masked swordsman were drowned in the sword waves, and no one could see them at all. After a long while, the crowd finally recovered from the shock. Who won? Someone had not figured out the situation yet. Looking at the 2 people standing in the sky, he asked in shock. Nieton and the ghost mask stood on top of the sword pillar, in the middle of the storm, unmoving. Their eyes were as sharp as blades, as if there was a surge of sword intent. All eyes were on the 2 of them. They wanted to speak, but didn't know what to say. Ha ha ha! Suddenly, the ghost masked swordsman burst out laughing. Nietion, I didn't think that even with my ghost martial body and the deadly wolf, you would still be no weaker than me. In the end, I have underestimated you. Just as his voice trailed off, the ghost mask on his face cracked open, revealing a familiar face. It was Tang 13. Nietion's eyes quivered, but his expression was murderous. At the last second, he decided to use the power of his other eyes to attack the demon body. He forced himself to break through his limits. Only then did he block the ghost masked swordsman's attack and gain the upper hand. Speak. Who are you? Nie Tianling asked coldly. He stepped forward and his sword intent surged. At that moment, he had the chance to kill the ghost masked swordsman. However, he was afraid of hurting Tang 13. Therefore, he held back some of his strength. I'm not Tang 13. The corner of the ghost masked swordsman's lips twitched. Acting lazy, he said slowly, Oh well, since you have defeated me, then this body is useless to me. What are you trying to do? Nietion's expression changed. His sword intent surged again. Don't be nervous. I won't destroy Tang 13's body. But after I leave, I'm not sure if this body can sustain itself. The ghost mask laughed again. Plus, Even if you can revive this body, you won't be able to find it. Chapter 43:16. Tang 13. Yet Tian screamed and caught Tang 13 in his arms. However, he could feel that the latter's life force was extremely weak, almost non-existent. Without hesitation, Nie Tian injected chi of life into Tang 13. To his horror, he found out that most of the chi of life was repelled and only a small amount was absorbed. Just then, Tang 13's appearance changed drastically. She was aging at a speed visible to the naked eye. Like a withered leaf in the wind, she was about to be torn apart. Damn it, Nie Tian growled and brought Tang 13 to Yin Feng Wua and the essence of red life. Yin Feng Wua took Tang 13 in his arms and frowned. Nie Tian, who is this? His expression was strange. He wanted to know how important Tang 13 was to Nie Tian. If it was just an ordinary friend, he wouldn't care. But if it was important enough, he would help. Nie Tian jerked his head up and fixed Yin Feng Wua with a piercing look in his eyes. Big brother, I won't allow him to die. Yin Feng Wu's expression changed. He knew that Tang 13 was not an ordinary friend and was very important to Nie Tian. Nie Tian, the curse on him is too strong. It won't be easy to save him. Even so, Yin Feng Wua was hesitant. Big brother, please make your move. Nie Tian was extremely determined as he pleaded. All right. Yin Feng Wua let out a long sigh and said, with my ability, I can only temporarily stop the decay of his body, so that this body will not die. If you want to save him, you must find his spirit. Then, he hesitated no more. He lifted his palm, and sword aura poured out of his palm and into Tang 13's body. Nie Tian felt the flow of the sword aura and was shocked. The sword aura entered Tang 13's body and flowed around her body like a stream. Then, the sword aura condensed into sword patterns that locked Tang 13's meridians. Done. After a while, Yin Feng Wua let out a long breath of impure air and spoke softly. However, beads of sweat had already seeped out from his forehead, and his face was as pale as paper. There was even a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that condensing these sword patterns with sword chi was a huge burden on him. Senior can actually condense sword chi into a lock and block his meridians. This method is really amazing. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was watching on the side. After he reacted, he couldn't help but exclaim, using sword chi to condense patterns, using sword chi to lock meridians. Such a method could be called a celestial being. There were no more than 3 people in the world who could do this. Big brother, thank you. Nie Tian looked at Yin Feng Wua and thanked him sincerely. Of course, he knew that Yin Feng Wua had paid a great price to save Tang 13. The sword patterns not only contained Yin Feng's sword chi and sword intent, but also contained his vitality. This was the only way to ensure that Tang 13's martial body would not deteriorate when her meridians were sealed. Yin Feng Wua was an old monster. Even though he was at the peak of the sky martial arts realm, there was a limit to his lifespan. He didn't hesitate to use his vitality to exchange his remaining lifespan for Tang 13's chance of survival. Nie Tian would always remember this kindness. Yin Feng Wua waved his hand and said sternly, "That's all I can do. His body is barely preserved. If you want him to be revived, you have to find his divine soul." Divine soul? Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He remembered what the ghost masked man had said before he left. Even if he could revive Tang 13's body, he wouldn't be able to find Tang 13's divine soul. Without a soul, the body was just a corpse. It was no different from a dead body. But the key was, where was Tang 13's divine soul? Had it been swallowed by the seal in his body, or had it been taken away by someone before the seal was cast? Nie Tian was more inclined to the second possibility. If Tang 13's divine soul had been swallowed, he could recover from the seal. He didn't have to search for it. If the ghost masked man had taken over Tang 13's body, it was very likely that he had used a special method to take away Tang 13's divine soul. After calming down, Nie Tian looked at Yin Feng and asked, "Big brother, do you know what kind of curse seal he's been afflicted with?" He had noticed that Yin Feng Wu's expression was a bit strange. Apparently, He knew something about the seal in Tang 13's body. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to use the sword mark vein seal to restrain Tang 13's decline. However, In Fenghua seemed to be afraid. He seemed to be running away. Could it be that the thing behind the seal in Tang 13's body was very terrifying? In Fenghua hadn't even been this nervous when the son of hell appeared. In Fenghua was silent for a while. Finally, he opened his mouth and sighed. If that person is using the power of a ghost martial artist, he should be from the ghost clan's origin vein. The ghost clan's origin vein? Tian frowned and was stunned. He already knew that there were 4 branches in the ghost clan. After the son of hell appeared, the reverse vein of the ghost clan also appeared. Now, another ghost clan's origin vein appeared. Why were the ghost clan's origin veins plucked like carrots? The ghost clan's origin vein is said to be the ghost clan's origin vein. Later, the 4 branches and the reverse vein of the ghost clan all developed from the origin vein. In Fenghua knew what Tian was thinking. He said, but the ghost clan's origin vein was extinct a long time ago. Their clansmen were either assimilated by the 4 branches or killed. I can see that person's ghost martial artist body is almost as pure as the ghost clan's origin vein. He should be the purest ghost practitioner. Brother, you said that the ghost martial artist body is the power of the ghost clan's origin veins bloodline. Tian asked in surprise. Yes. In Fenghua nodded. Noticing Tian's strange expression, he asked, what's wrong? Tian frowned and said, that ghost masked man said that the ghost martial artist body is the power born from the ghost eye. And the ghost eye is the power of the Tang clan's bloodline. Doesn't that mean the Tang clan is the ghost clan's origin vein? Tang clan? The ghost eye? In Fenghua was also stunned. He looked at Tang 13 and used his divine sense to sense her body. His face became more and more shocked. In the end, he was stunned on the spot. Tian and the Scarlet Life loyal heart looked at In Fenghua, waiting for him to speak. The power in his body does have the aura of our ghost clan. In Fenghua finally reacted and said, but I can't confirm whether he is the ghost clan's origin vein or not. Maybe after the Yellow Spring struggle is over, I will bring him to see that person. When he meets that person, he'll understand. Chapter 43:17. In Fenghua did not explain too much, and yet Tian did not ask too much. It seemed that he could only seek answers after leaving the Yellow Spring sacred land. Tang 13's current situation was unknown, and he could not find her soul, so he could only remain as he was for now. Tian placed Tang 13 in the 9 extremities and had Fatty take care of her. Although Tian had won the battle against the Ghost-Face swordsman, he had expended too much power and was heavily injured. But no matter what, he had still advanced to the top 4. Following that, the other 2 battles began one after another. The final result was as expected. Ren Huang and Lin Fan won easily. The top 4 of the Yellow Spring Sacred Land had been decided. They were the Human Emperor, Lin Fan, Lung Huang Jishue, and Tian. Everyone looked at Tian and the others with excitement in their eyes. The Yellow Spring Sacred Land had basically gathered the most talented and powerful swordsmen of the entire All Heaven Saints world. Being able to become the top 4 undoubtedly proved that Tian and the other 3's talent was already at the peak. However, there was still a difference between the peak. Putting aside the fact that Tian's performance was weaker than Lung Huang Jishue and Lin Fan during the Yellow Spring Sword Hum, his current condition was definitely the worst among the 4. This kid, named Tian, is only at the 4th level of Sword Heavenly Tribulation. I can't believe he actually made it this far. This is really unexpected. He's definitely the biggest dark horse in this competition. However, his road to the top 4 will basically stop at his current level. Yeah, he's so heavily injured now. He can't fight at all. If I were him, I would just admit defeat. It's just fighting for the right to choose the Yellow Springs flower anyway. It doesn't matter too much. The crowd discussed and looked at Tian with a sliver of pity. If he was in good condition, he might really be able to fight against the Human Emperor or the young Human Emperor, but now it was better to admit defeat. Tian did not care when he heard what the crowd said. He had taken advantage of the gap in the battle between the human emperor and Lin Fan to recover slightly, but he had only recovered 30 to 40%. It was indeed very dangerous to fight against human emperor or Lin Fan in this state. Nie Tian, are you confident? In Fenghua asked in a deep voice. So what if I'm confident or not? Aren't we going to fight anyway? Nie Tian smiled bitterly, but the sharpness in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest. In Fenghua sighed helplessly. Next, the four of them did not draw lots. Ren Huang directly chose Nie Tian as his opponent. Naturally, Lin Fan and the Cold Phoenix Ji Shui became opponents. Nie Tian naturally understood human sovereign's intentions. He wanted to exhaust his strength to the maximum so that Lin Fan would have a greater chance of winning. On the sword pillar, the battle between Nie Tian and human sovereign began. Nie Tian, I didn't think that you could actually reach this step. Human sovereign stood with his hands behind his back, sword aura surging around him. He had the demeanor of a grandmaster, but his eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. Previously, he did not care about Nie Tian, but after a few battles, especially after Nie Tian defeated Ghastly Face, he had made up his mind to kill Nie Tian. I didn't think that the first person to fight against me would be you. Nie Tian smiled indifferently, not afraid at all. Very good. Even at this moment, I still don't see any fear in your eyes. Human Sovereign's eyes flickered with a hint of praise. You're a pure warrior, fearless, and know how to use your strength. Explode with the strongest power. If you weren't against me, I would have accepted you into the human emperor's palace. Is that so? Nie Tianling chuckled, unconcerned. Even if human sovereign wanted him to join the human emperor's palace, he did not care. Come on, let me see how much strength you have now. Human sovereign did not waste any more words. Sword aura surged around him, forming a huge sword formation that spread wildly in all directions. Nie Tian sensed an oppressive force approaching him, and his expression changed. But the next moment, he made up his mind and unsheathed the Sword of Sky. He activated the Celestial Demon inscription and slashed downwards. A raging dragon flew into the sky and slashed at human sovereign. He knew how terrifying human sovereign was, so he gave it his all, hoping to gain the upper hand. Bang! In the void, a huge sword shadow fell, but it was blocked by the sword aura shield around human sovereign's body and shattered. Nie Tian's body trembled, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. He suddenly felt his blood rush to his head, and he almost vomited blood. How could this be? He steadied himself, shocked. Human Sovereign's talent was at most similar to that of the young God Sword Emperor and not much stronger than Grimace. But how could he have such strength in the 9 Heavenly Calamity realm? When Nie Tian activated the Celestial Demon body, even Grimace would not dare to take it head-on. Human Sovereign did not even use his sword, but he pushed Nie Tian back. It was terrifying. Kid, is this your strength? Human Sovereign sneered and looked disdainful. Too weak. Nie Tian took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He told himself that his sword essence was not weaker than human sovereigns, so there was no need to be afraid. Then, he attacked several times, but they were all blocked by human sovereign's sword aura shield. Bang! Another sword fell, and Nie Tian's figure flew out. After retreating for a few hundred meters, he spat out a mouthful of blood. How is this possible? He couldn't believe what he was seeing. There was no reason for human sovereign to be so strong. When the crowd saw this, they were also shocked and puzzled. Nie Tian defeated Grimace. Even if he is no match for human sovereign, he shouldn't be crushed like this. What is that sword aura shield around human sovereign's body? How can it be so strong? It seems to be a sword formation. If Nie Tian can't even break this sword formation, human sovereign doesn't need to do anything. He will be defeated. As they spoke, they looked at Nie Tian with sympathy in their eyes. No matter who it was, they would be desperate if they met an expert like human sovereign. Senior, what's going on? What kind of power is that human sovereign using? Why can't Nie Tian break his sword or a shield? Red Life Loyal Heart was also a little anxious and couldn't help but look at In Feng Wuwa. This should be some kind of sword formation. Human sovereign's control of sword aura has reached the acme of perfection. He can control every sword aura perfectly. I'm afraid Nyetian is going to be defeated. Infengwu's face was pale, and he said in a deep voice, "This." Red Life Loyal Heart's face suddenly froze. Even Infengwu said so. Wouldn't Nyetian be defeated? Chapter 43:18. The human emperor's sword slashed down. Although it looked thin, it actually contained endless power. A mighty pressure descended from the heavens and morphed into the most deadly killing intent that could be sensed from all directions as it slashed towards Nyetian. At this moment, everyone's eyes trembled. Everyone could feel the despair under the sword shadow. Everyone had a strong premonition that once the sword fell, the battle would be over and Nyetian would die under the human emperor's sword. Lin Fan frowned. His expression was a little strange, as if there was a trace of resentment. Originally, he wanted to fight Nyetian first, but the human emperor insisted that he fight last. Now it seemed that there was no need for him to fight. The human emperor's sword could destroy all living things. Even if Lin Fan wanted to block it, he would have to pay a big price. Maybe if Nyetian was in his prime, he would have a chance of survival. But now that Nyetian was seriously injured, he would definitely die. The Red Life Loyal Essence's heart was in his throat. His nerves were tense, and he didn't even dare to breathe heavily. Even though he was tens of thousands of meters away, he could feel the despair of death. Although he didn't want to see what was going to happen next, his reason told him that Nyetian couldn't block it. Infengwu was even more stunned. If Nyetian lost, the consequences would not only be his own death, but also the life and death of the entire ghost race. Above the sword pillar, the sword chi whistled, and the sound of the sword was like thunder. The boundless sword fell as if it was going to cover the sky and the earth. Nyetian stood there, but he was like a small boat in the boundless ocean, about to be drowned in the next moment. But he was very calm, and there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he was extremely indifferent, as if he had seen through everything. Just as the boundless sword pressure was about to descend, Nyetian finally made his move. He took a step forward, and the power of the stars that had been accumulated in his body for a long time burst out. Suddenly, like a waterfall of stars, it surrounded his body. Then he spread out his hands. Starlight flashed in his palms, and the colorful light was extremely dazzling. 9 limits of starry sky, 7th limit, reverse yin and yang. Starry sky 9 limits, 8th limit, Shinkuan transformation. Then he spoke calmly and moved his palms at the same time. Instantly, the surrounding space began to tremble as if it had been summoned and was about to be overturned as well. At this moment, Nyetian was like a god that had come from the primeval starry sky. He controlled yin and yang with one hand, severed the world with the other, and controlled everything. Boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, 2 powerful auras shot up into the sky and forcefully broke through the boundless sword pressure. Suddenly, the world seemed to be on the verge of exploding as it shook incessantly. What happened? Even though they were more than 100,000 meters away, they could still feel the tremors coming from the void, and their expressions changed. They only saw Nyetian's body explode with enormous power, but they didn't know what exactly happened. Could it be that under such circumstances, Nyetian still had a chance to turn the tables? Lin Fan was stunned as well. His lips were trembling as though he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He had a much clearer view of the situation on the field than anyone else. He couldn't believe his eyes. Nyetian could actually explode with such terrifying power. One had to know that Nyetian was in a state of serious injury, and it was absolutely impossible for him to explode with such power. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was so shocked that he couldn't speak. His reaction was even more exaggerated than Lin Fan's. Nyetian had used the 7th and 8th limits of the 9 limits of Starry Sky at the same time. This was too terrifying. As a Starry Sky emissary, he knew how terrifying the 9 limits of Starry Sky was. It was Hyakuten's most powerful forbidden technique, especially the last 3 limits. Even if it was Hyakuten himself, it wouldn't be easy for him to use the 7th and 8th limits at the same time. And yet Tion's cultivation was only at the 4th level of the Heaven's Tribulation, and he was also in a state of serious injury. How could he use the 7th and 8th limits? Infengwa was also stunned. He felt the explosion of power from Tion. It was a power that shocked even him. Boom! At this moment, in the sky, 2 beams of starlight flowed, destroying everything in their path. Human Emperor's expression changed. He immediately sensed danger and retreated, but he was still a step too late. Bang! A muffled sound came out. Human Emperor was hit by a tyrannical force. His figure fell like a kite with a broken string, leaving a trail of blood in the void. After a long time, the wild waves in the sky finally dissipated. On top of the sword pillar, a figure stood bathed in blood, but he was like a mountain, majestic and unshakable. On the other side, Human Emperor's figure trembled as he stood below, as if he couldn't stand anymore. But his eyes were fixed on Tion. Surprise, anger, hatred, unwillingness, and even fear formed an extremely complicated expression. Lost, lost. The crowd was stunned for a long time. Finally, someone reacted and said in horror, Human Emperor lost. Everyone suddenly reacted and felt a chill from head to toe. They all looked at Human Emperor and Tion in disbelief. Who would have thought that Human Emperor, who had an overwhelming advantage, would lose? Originally, everyone thought that Tion would be killed, but they didn't expect him to turn the situation around. But on what basis? What kind of power was hidden in Tion's body? Human Emperor, you are just so. Tianling stood on top of the sword pillar. The blood on his body dispersed, and his eyes became sharp again. He spoke coldly. How arrogant and how arrogant. Human Emperor's body trembled, and he finally couldn't take it anymore. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as paper. He said in a deep voice, Tion, ever since I reached the Sky Martial Arts Divine Ancestor Realm, you're the only one who has defeated me in hundreds of thousands of years. I'll remember your name. After he finished speaking, his figure moved and landed on the ground. He sat down with his legs crossed and started to rest. At that moment, he even felt the aura of death. He couldn't imagine that a warrior in the 4th level of the Heaven's Calamity Realm could actually threaten his life. At this moment, he didn't care about his reputation and directly rested because he was too heavily injured. The corner of Tion's mouth twitched. He moved and jumped down from the sword pillar. Tion, how are you? Infengwa hurried forward and injected origin energy into Tion's body. Tion's face was pale. He swallowed dozens of divine elixir pills and took a few deep breaths before he finally calmed down. I'm fine. It's just a pity that I didn't kill Human Emperor. Tion let out a breath and couldn't help but feel a little regretful. The opportunity just now was really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kill Human Emperor. It was a pity that he missed it. Chapter 43:19. Although Tion defeated Ren Huang, there was still Lin Fan waiting for him. Lin Fan was his biggest opponent, his real opponent. If he couldn't defeat Lin Fan, then all the previous battles would have been in vain. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart told him not to fight in the next battle. Of course, he couldn't agree. Sigh. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart clearly didn't expect Tion and Infengwa to oppose so firmly. He could only sigh. In his opinion, since Tion had already mastered the 7th and 8th limits of the Starry Sky 9 limits, there was no need to fight with an opponent who was no weaker than him when he was seriously injured. Why should he care about success or failure? He didn't know about the bet between Tion and Lin Fan. Next, the second battle of the top 4 began. 2 figures stood on the sword pillar. They were Lin Fan and Lung Huang Jishue. Tion looked at the figure that was like an iceberg. His eyes trembled slightly. He had a lot of words in his heart, but he didn't know where to start. This girl's talent is no less than Lin Fan's. She should be able to force Lin Fan to use his true strength. Infengwa didn't pay too much attention to it. He didn't expect Lung Huang Jishue to defeat Lin Fan, but she should at least be able to force the latter to use his true strength. If Lin Fan was injured, then Yetion's chances would undoubtedly be greater. During the sword chant of Underworld, you use your sword intent to split the Underworld steel. But that doesn't mean that your sword intent is stronger than mine. Lin Fan's eyes were cold and solemn. He locked his gaze on Leng Huang Jishue from afar. Make your move. Leng Huang Jishue didn't want to talk nonsense with him. All right. The corners of Lin Fan's mouth curled up into a cold smile. An almost transparent sword appeared in his hand, and he stabbed in the air. An invisible ray of light shot out soundlessly, but it carried an extremely sharp, killing intent as it attacked towards Leng Huang Jishue. Leng Huang Jishue's face was as calm as water. Her eyes were cold, like a cold pond at the bottom of the abyss. A red longsword appeared in her hand. She slashed in the air, and a flame-like sword intent spread out. Boom! In the next moment, a muffled sound rang out in the void. Cold Phoenix Jishue's figure trembled, and she took a few steps back. On the other hand, Lin Fan was like an old tree, not moving at all. Very good. Lin Fan's lips curled into a smile. His translucent body moved, and a streak of light sliced through the air. It was even sharper than before. The cold Phoenix Jishue steadied herself, and the sword within her body erupted. A pair of crimson wings appeared on her back, and her entire person was like a phoenix in flames. She raised her sword high up in the air and blocked the flowing light in the air. However, in the end, she was still a little weaker. A thin line of blood appeared on her delicate and flawless face. Yetion's eyes darkened when he saw this. Even if Cold Phoenix Jishue's sword intent was not stronger than Lin Fan's, it was definitely not weaker than his. But now, the Cold Phoenix Jishue was being suppressed by Lin Fan. What was going on? Putting aside the internal injuries in her body, Lin Fan's control over the sword intent is far beyond hers. Yin Fengwu seemed to have seen through Yetion's doubts and said solemnly, "Internal injuries." Yetion's expression changed once again. When Cold Phoenix Jishue was fighting against the heavy sword Three Beasts, she had exposed her internal injuries. After such a long time, he thought that Cold Phoenix Jishue's internal injuries had almost recovered. He did not expect that she had not recovered yet. Her internal injuries are very troublesome. I'm afraid that not only has she not recovered, but it has also become more serious than before. Yin Fengwu frowned and said with a gloomy face, "This." Yetion's eyes shrank, and his heart was in his throat. If Cold Phoenix Jishue was at her peak, she might not be weaker than Lin Fan. But now, Cold Phoenix Jishue's defeat was already decided. With her strength, she must have understood that this was a battle that she was destined to lose. But she did not admit defeat. Instead, she stubbornly persisted. It was most likely not for herself. At this time, Yin Fengwu could not help but glance at Yetion and said in his heart, "Yetion, this lady is seriously injured, but she still wants to force out Lin Fan's strength. I'm afraid that her relationship with you is not ordinary." Yetion frowned and became worried. Boom! At this moment, Lin Fan's sword fell. An almost transparent sword shadow surged in the void, and it actually caused layers of ripples like water. It looked extremely gorgeous. But under this gorgeous, there was a hidden murderous intent. Cold Phoenix Jishue was not afraid at all. The sword intent in her body rose to the extreme, and she directly slashed with her sword to resist Lin Fan. Boom! Suddenly, there was a roar in the air. Endless sword intent exploded, interweaving into a strange scene of fire and water. Cold Phoenix Jishue's body stagnated in the air. Then she groaned and retreated dozens of meters. Puff! After she stabilized her body, although she was trying her best to resist, she still spurted out a mouthful of blood. Her pretty face became as pale as paper. Oh no! Yetion saw this, and his heart sank again. But the next moment, Cold Phoenix Jishue suddenly took a step forward. Then, the blood chi around her surged, and the sword intent surged to an even more terrifying degree. Burning blood chi? Lin Fan looked at Cold Phoenix Jishue and could not help but frown. This battle, Is it that important to you? Cold Phoenix bathed in blood. 3 lives indestructible. At this moment, Cold Phoenix Ji Shui spoke in a deep voice. The blood chi and sword intent around her erupted to the extreme, and she slashed with her sword. The sword intent condensed in the air and turned into a phoenix bathed in blood. It flapped its wings and pressed towards Lin Fan. Since you want to die, then I will fulfill your wish. Lin Fan suddenly felt the pressure, and his face changed. His voice was low and murderous. He took a step forward, and the sword intent aura around him changed. Then a strange scene happened. A blood-like short sword appeared in his hand. Dual swords. In Feng Wu looked at Lin Fan, and his face suddenly sank. He never thought that Lin Fan was a swordsman with dual swords. Swordsmen usually only used one sword, because one sword was enough to exert the sword intent to the extreme. But there were also very few swordsmen who practiced both sword and saber, or used dual swords. Those who used dual swords were all amazing people, and their control of their own sword intent had reached the acme of perfection. Previously, Lin Fan had only used one sword, and no one expected him to take out a second sword at this moment. Nie Tian's face also changed at this moment, and all the blood in his body seemed to have stopped. The next moment, Lin Fan attacked. He stabbed with both swords at the same time, and countless sharp blades appeared in the surrounding space. Red and white alternated like water and fire, and the scene was extremely impactful. At this moment, Lin Fan's sword intent seemed to have broken through the shackles of heaven and earth, and was about to imprison heaven and earth. The crowd looked at the sky, and their expressions were dull. Chapter 43:20. Boom! High up in the sky, a terrifying roar resounded. Heaven and earth trembled, and the blood-bathed phoenix could no longer hold on. It exploded and turned into waves of sword will, rushing in all directions. At this moment, the endless sword shadows condensed into a crimson blade. It shook in the void and suddenly shot out, attacking Lung Huang Jishui. In an instant, a bone-chilling cold spread out. Time and space suddenly stagnated, as if it had stopped. Danger! Nie Tian suddenly felt the cold aura approaching. His pupils shrank, and he screamed. But unfortunately, it was too late. Before Lung Huang Jishui could react, the crimson blade pierced through her body. She trembled in the air and fell straight down. Share! Seeing this, Nie Tian's figure flashed and flew in the direction of Lung Huang Jishui's fall. But before his figure arrived, Lung Huang Jishui stopped in the air and then stabilized her body. She stood there coldly. Half of her body was dyed red with blood, but her eyes were fearless and cold. Not dead. Lin Fan was very proud, but when he saw Lung Huang Jishui stop, his eyes trembled and he was shocked. He didn't expect that after he used both swords, Lung Huang Jishui could survive. Nie Tian was also stunned. He wanted to go forward, but he felt the coldness of Lung Huang Jishui. It was obvious that she was rejecting him. I'm fine. Lung Huang Jishui finally looked at Nie Tian and said solemnly, He's very strong, be careful. After that, she moved and retreated far away. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He just nodded and returned to In Feng Wu's side. And at this moment, the surrounding crowd was in an uproar. This Lin Fan is so strong. He's actually a dual swordsman. His sword just now shocked the world, but he didn't kill that ice beauty. It's really unexpected. That lady is also a swordsman who triggered the cry of the sky and left a sword mark on the yellow spring tablet. Her talent should be above Lin Fan. How did she lose? Everyone was discussing, not satisfied with the outcome. Nie Tian, it's your turn. On the sword pillar, Lin Fan paid no attention to the others. His eyes were like sharp blades as they locked onto Nie Tian from afar, and he spoke in a clear voice. Nie Tian furrowed his brows. This guy was really insolent. He didn't want to leave the sword pillar and wanted to fight him directly. Big brother, I'm going. Nie Tian nodded to In Feng Wu, then turned around and stepped onto the sword pillar. He had also been looking forward to this battle for a long time. Nie Tian, it's been hard on you. In Feng Wu's face tightened. He couldn't bear it. He naturally knew that after experiencing numerous bloody battles, Tian had suffered extremely heavy injuries, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was an arrow at the end of its flight. However, for the sake of the Great Empress and the Ghost Race, Tian had to fight Lin Fan. Even though Lin Fan and Lung Huang Jishua had just fought, he wasn't injured at all. He had only used up some of his strength. But Tian was seriously injured. Everyone looked at the two figures on the sword pillar, and their expressions changed. Tian is really a lunatic. He's already injured to this extent, and he still wants to fight Lin Fan. Isn't he just courting death? That's right. Anyway, it's just the right to choose the yellow springs flower first. What's the difference between being first and second? If I were Tian, I would directly admit defeat without even going up the sword pillar. So what if I directly give the first place to Lin Fan? The crowd said, shaking their heads and sighing. They couldn't understand why Tian was still persisting and risking his life to do something that was practically meaningless. Standing on the sword pillar, Tian didn't pay any attention to the people around him. All of his attention was focused on Lin Fan. This was a powerful enemy, an ultimate opponent. How could he underestimate him? Tian, I thought you would be defeated by teacher. I didn't expect you to reach the last step. Lin Fan looked at Tian, and his lips curled into a faint smile. But this is also good. You won't have any complaints if I defeat you. Face expressionless, Tian asked, Are you sure you can defeat me? Tian, don't think that you're lucky just because I was forced to use my swords. Let me tell you, you have no idea how strong I am. Lin Fan laughed coldly. His entire aura changed in an instant. It was as though he was a mountain. He was like a god looking down on everything, cold and proud. Tian instantly felt a huge pressure. His expression changed, and his heart was filled with shock. At this moment, the pressure he felt was even more terrifying than when he faced the human emperor. Could it be that there was an even more terrifying power hidden in Lin Fan's body? Tian, since you're only at the 4th level of Heaven's Calamity, for the sake of fairness, I'll also suppress my cultivation to the 4th level. Lin Fan's lips curled into a cold smile. With a thought, he set up a seal in his body, forcefully suppressing his strength. You that confident? Tian's eyes sank, and he asked coldly. Of course. Lin Fan smiled proudly and said, In this battle, I'll let you see clearly how big the gap between us is. After saying that, he took a step forward, and the sword pillar under his feet shook, as if it was about to collapse. Tian's expression changed again. So this is the real Lin Fan? Come on, Tian. Let me see how many times you can withstand my attacks. Lin Fan obviously enjoyed Tian's shocked expression. He laughed wildly, and the sword intent in his body slowly condensed, as if it was going to drown the entire world. How is this possible? How can this guy be so strong? Scarlet Life Loyal Heart felt Lin Fan's aura, and its expression changed. There's a force in his body that's being released. Infeng Wu frowned. The next moment, he suddenly realized something, and his face became dull. Senior, what did you find? Scarlet Life Loyal Heart saw this, and it suddenly became nervous, and its voice was trembling. There are a few seals in his body, and they're slowly being opened now. Infeng Wu took a deep breath and said solemnly, This. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart's pupils shrank, and it said in shock, Could it be that before he was fighting in a state where the seals were not opened? Yes. Infeng Wu nodded in shock. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was stunned, and it couldn't speak for a long time. It turned out that before, Lin Fan was fighting under the suppression of the seals. Now that the seals were opened, it revealed his true strength. No wonder even when facing Tian, he was still full of confidence. At this time, the crowd was also shocked by Lin Fan. Many people's eyes were wide open, but they couldn't say a word. Chapter 43:21. Boom! High up in the sky, the sword pressure was like a storm, sweeping and suppressing everything. Tian stood on top of the sword pillar. Under the endless sword pressure, he looked even weaker. Everyone's eyes couldn't help but tremble. They seemed to be worried that Tian would be killed by the sword pressure. Was Nyetian going to lose after the first strike? Just as the sword pressure was about to fall, Nyetian's figure moved. The clear sky's sword was unsheathed, and starlight soared into the sky. Using a single point to break the surface, he forcibly opened up a gap. At the same time, he opened up a path of survival for himself. Strong. Everyone's eyes trembled. They didn't say anything and exclaimed in unison. The fact that Nyetian was able to break through such powerful sword pressure with such ease showed that he was indeed strong. Most importantly, Nyetian was seriously injured at the moment. Seeing this, Wu's heart that was hanging in the air suddenly relaxed. At this moment, he suddenly felt hope. All along, he had underestimated Nyetian. Even though he had changed his view of Nyetian many times, he had to admit that he had underestimated Nyetian. Very good. His sword missed, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and the excitement in his eyes was even more intense. He didn't know how long it had been, but he finally met an opponent who made him want to fight. The second strike. In the next moment, the sword in Lin Fan's palm spun in the air. Suddenly, a burning sword aura bloomed and turned into the fiercest killing intent. It attacked directly towards Nyetian. How could he not see that the reason why Nyetian could block his first strike was not because Nyetian's sword intent was stronger than his, but because Nyetian saw the weakness in his sword move? He had to admit that Nyetian's battle talent and sword sense were the best he had seen in his life. But that didn't change anything. Nyetian would definitely lose this battle, because Lin Fan, had to win. The second sword turned majestic and swift and fierce, causing heaven and earth to tremble and space to seem as if it was about to be torn apart. Nyetian immediately felt the killing intent, but his expression only changed slightly. He activated his God-fiend body and slashed out with his sword. However, he still did not manage to block the sword. Pooh! The instant the sword's shadow flashed past, his shoulder was directly pierced through, and his body was bleeding profusely. But he still stood there, completely ignoring the injuries on his body. Nyetian, the most terrifying thing about you compared to other martial artists is your martial body. Lin Fan's eyes narrowed slightly as he smiled coldly. But it's a pity that no matter how strong a martial body is, it's still useless under my sword. So much nonsense. Nyetian's eyes were gloomy and cold. Since you are in such a hurry to die, I will grant you your wish. Lin Fan was clearly angered. His eyes turned cold, and a second sword appeared in his hand. He's using the second sword. Everyone screamed when they saw this. In the battle, just now, everyone had already seen the power of Lin Fan's two swords, so they were naturally very excited. Nyetian, can you block my third sword? Lin Fan's mouth was cold, and the sword will all over his body surged crazily, as if it was going to drown the heaven and earth. It was hard to imagine that a swordsman in the 4th level of sword catastrophe could burst out with such a powerful sword will. Even a Ren Wang in the 9th level of sword catastrophe did not have such an imposing manner. You will know after you try. Nyetian was not afraid at all. Instead, his eyes were full of fighting spirit, like a wild and unyielding beast. Nyetian, you are qualified to be my opponent. You deserve my full strength. Lin Fan laughed wildly, and then both swords moved together. The sword will swept out in all directions, traversing the heaven and earth. Come on. Nyetian stood alone, not afraid at all, like a warrior who looked down on the heaven and earth, not afraid of anything. Buzz! In the next moment, the endless sword will moved, and then a sonorous sword cry sounded between the heaven and earth, as if the heaven and earth were crying together. The whole world shook as if it was worshipping Lin. At this moment, the 3 seals hidden deep in Lin Fan's body were all opened. At this moment, this was his real strength, his real power. He had absolute confidence that if this sword fell, Nyetian would definitely die. Boom! The heaven and earth roared, and the sword light shone like the sun, but it was extremely fierce, pressing down on Nyetian. Everyone looked up into the sky, and their expressions were dull. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, No one would have believed that such a terrifying scene came from a swordsman in the 4th level of sword catastrophe. Who could imagine how terrifying it would be if Lin Fan did not suppress his strength and released it all? At this moment, there was only one thought in everyone's mind. Nie Tian is dead. In Feng Wua and Red Life Loyal Heart were also stunned, and one word was written on their faces: despair. If they were the ones facing Lin Fan now, they might not even be able to block the first sword. And this third sword was many times stronger than the first sword. Even if they were to face this sword at the peak of sword catastrophe, there would only be one outcome: death. Under such circumstances, would Nie Tian have a chance of surviving? At the same time, on the sword pillar, Nie Tian's eyes were like water, like a windless lake, without any ripples, no life, no death, no sadness, no joy. It was as if everything that happened outside had nothing to do with him. In the next moment, a strange change happened outside of Nie Tian's body, and a mass of starlight wrapped around him. Looking from afar, Nie Tian looked like a massive starlight whirlpool, but if one looked closely, they would not be able to see it clearly, and it was like a mass of chaos. If one were to sense it, one would be shocked to find that this mass of chaos contained endless Tao, the true meaning of heaven and earth, and the chaos of the universe. In Feng Wu's despairing eyes moved at this moment, like a starving man who had been starving for countless days suddenly seeing a table of delicious food. Boom! And at this moment, the huge sword shadow finally pressed down, and the destructive power fell, causing the earth to tremble, and the sun and moon to lose their light. Boom, 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 pung, 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 chi, chi, chi. In the sky, endless power crashed, as if it wanted to annihilate the heaven and earth. At the center, that was where the power was the most violent, colliding, devouring, destroying, merging, and containing the most terrifying evolution of power. Nie Tian goodbye. Lin Fan stood coldly in the sky, like a god, and spoke softly, as if he was pronouncing a sentence. The crowd was also stunned. Although they did not see the scene of Nie Tian being killed, they had already imagined it in their minds. Under such power, Nie Tian would definitely die. Hua! But at this moment, at the center of the collision, suddenly a ray of starlight shot out like a ray of light in the dark night. Chapter 43:22. The Extremity of Chaos. In Feng Wu spat out these 4 words. His entire body froze, as if he had been petrified. What's going on? The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart sensed that something was wrong. His expression suddenly changed. At this moment, he felt that his body was stimulated by a force as if it was about to explode. He was very sure that the power Nie Tian used was the power of the stars, but he was very unfamiliar with it. At the same time, everyone was also shocked and could not believe the scene in front of them. Boom! At this moment, there was a roar that seemed to split the sky and the earth. The surrounding void suddenly trembled, and suddenly a violent force broke out, forcibly breaking through the endless sword shadows. Bang, bang, bang. Then, the sound of explosions was endless. The sword shadows that originally had the power to destroy heaven and earth collapsed under the endless starlight. At this moment, Lin Fan also felt that something was wrong. His figure kept retreating, directly passing through several sword pillars. The battlefield of their ultimate battle had been extended to the entire sword pillar formation. Just as Lin Fan was retreating, in a void on the other side, a bright light that was like a vast star rose directly above the sky, like the sun in the sky. What is that? At this moment, everyone could no longer suppress the shock in their hearts and exclaimed one after another. Look, it's Nie Tian. Immediately, a swordsman with extremely strong perception shouted, pointing at the starlight, extremely shocked. Everyone looked over. In the starlight, there was a faint figure emerging, and it was actually the figure of Nie Tian. At this moment, in the sky on the other side, a pair of eyes that had been hidden for a long time appeared, followed by a familiar demonic face. It was Mori Shire. Nie Tian, you really did not let me down. Mori Shire's mouth twitched, and he murmured, the power that the vein sealing restriction gave you, does it make you very excited? Unfortunately, There's always a price to pay for the power that you get from me. Yes. When he said the last word, the darkness in his eyes deepened, and his whole person was like a huge abyss. At the same time, Nietian walked out from the starlight. Like an immortal, he stood between the heavens and the earth, his aura like a rainbow. At this moment, all the injuries on his body had disappeared, and he was releasing a powerful aura, as if he had been reborn. On the other side, Lin Fan's eyes were trembling, and his entire body was covered in blood. Just now, under the impact of the starlight, he was severely injured. If he hadn't dodged in time, he would have been a corpse by now. How is this possible? How could this be? Lin Fan's eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't believe it all. He couldn't accept everything that was happening before his eyes. Nietian had clearly been defeated by him and was about to die. How could he turn the tables in such a desperate situation? He had clearly sensed that Nietian's aura was already very weak. So how could he explode with such tyrannical power? Who was Nietian? What was hidden in his body? At this moment, Lin Fan looked at Nietian. Other than shock, there was more fear in his eyes. His eyes were no longer playful, no longer excited. Instead, it was replaced by genuine fear and cowardice. This was the biggest difference between Lin Fan and Nietian. Nietian could look all the strong people in the eye, but Lin Fan only looked down on the weak. When the crowd saw Nietian's figure clearly, they instantly exploded. It's Nietian. It's really Nietian. How could he still be alive? Not only is this guy alive, but he also exploded with such terrifying power. That Lin Fan was actually injured by him. In that instant just now, what exactly did Nietian go through? How could he still fight against Lin Fan and even injure Lin Fan? As the crowd spoke, they looked at Nietian with incomparable horror, as if they were looking at a god. Nietian's strength was weaker than any of the people present, but the power he showed was stronger than any of them. He was only in the 4th level of the Heaven's Calamity realm. If he reached the peak of the Sky Martial Arts realm, how terrifying would he be? As the crowd thought so, there was more awe in their eyes. There were even quite a few people who subconsciously retreated. He actually used the extreme of chaos. How is this possible? Infenghua had calmed down at this time, but his eyes were flickering and he was about to cry with joy. Extreme of chaos? Scarlet Life Loyal Heart looked surprised and asked in astonishment, "What is that?" "The 9th limit." Infenghua nodded with a solemn face. "The 9th limit?" Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was stunned again, then immediately reacted and said in shock, "The 9th limit of the starry sky." He was shocked and petrified for a few seconds before he finally reacted. How could he have imagined that Nietian would use the 9th limit of the starry sky 9 limits at the last moment? But the next moment his face suddenly changed and he said in astonishment, "Senior, how do you know about the 9th limit?" The 9th limit of the starry sky 9 limits, the extreme of chaos. This was the strongest move of the 9th star emissary, Hayakuten. Even the 8th star emissary had never seen it before. How did Infenghua know about it? Infenghua glanced at the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and said indifferently, "I once fought with Hayakuten and he used this move to injure me." This? Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was shocked and couldn't say a word. But he still couldn't figure out how Nietian could master the 9th limit. One must know that even the ultimate martial evil Sky himself had to pay a huge price to use the 9th limit. Alas, Infenghua let out a sigh at this moment. His face had actually aged a lot in an instant. The Ghost Clan owed Nietian too much. He could already see that the reason why Nietian could use the 9th limit was not because of his amazing comprehension, but because he used another forbidden power to force his martial body and even the power of the stars to the greatest limit. And this forbidden power was the power that Mori Shire left in Nietian's body, the vein sealing restriction. Nietian had been injured several times before, but he didn't burn his blood chi. Instead, he let the blood chi erupt in his body and used it to forcibly open the vein sealing restriction. It was because of the opening of the vein sealing restriction that he used the chaotic extreme. But how could the power of the sun of Yellow Spring be used so easily? The vein sealing restriction was a kind of bloodline restriction. Since Niet Tian used it, it meant that the power of the restriction had already seeped into his bloodline. The vein sealing restriction, life taken from Yellow Spring. The price of opening the vein sealing restriction was the crazy burning of the power of the bloodline and the power of life, and it couldn't be stopped. In other words, Niet Tian was in the state of burning his life, so his injuries could be healed instantly. And the speed of this burning of life was unimaginably fast. Chapter 43:23. The Vein Sealing Restriction, Death Snatch. Behind a great power was a great price. Niet Tian opened the vein sealing restriction and burned his life crazily. He only had 3 years left at most. Infeng Wu's eyes trembled. His face became extremely old, as if the person burning his life was not Niet Tian, but him. And above the void, Mori Shire's figure appeared again. A pair of gloomy eyes carried a strange excitement. Niet Tian, you are more terrifying than I expected. You can actually use the vein sealing restriction to this extent. Mori Shire's mouth twitched slightly. He was actually a little nervous. He smiled sinisterly and said, "But the more you do this, the more you will be controlled by me. According to the current speed of burning your life, if you don't want to die, you must surrender to me." Surrender. This was the real reason why he left the vein sealing restriction in Niet Tian's body. First Tisk, everything was under his control. At the moment he stood on the sword pillar with Niet Tian, he had already expected what Niet Tian would encounter next. Niet Heaven's opponents were each stronger than the last, and he could only go all out. In the end, Niet Tian had no choice but to open the vein sealing restriction. But even Mori Shire had to admit that he had underestimated Niet Tian. The latter's control and display of the vein sealing restriction was much more terrifying than he had expected. But the more it was like this, the faster Niet Tian burned his life and the shorter his lifespan was. Seal the vein sealing restriction was the bloodline restriction of the Yellow Spring clan. In this world, no one could open it except for Mori Shire. Then there was only one path in front of Niet Tian: bow to Mori Shire. Niet Tian, you are still in my hands after all. Thinking of this, Mori Shire raised the corner of his mouth, and his face was cold. At the same time, on the sword pillar, Niet Tian, what kind of power is this? Lin Fan steadied himself and forced himself to calm down. Are you scared? Niet Tianling replied with a smile. He could feel the fear in Lin Fan's eyes. It was a kind of respect for the strong, but at the same time, it was a kind of deep despair. Hereunto at this moment, Lin Fan no longer had that lofty ambition from before, nor did he have the playfulness of seeing a prey. Instead, it was replaced with a strong sense of fear. Hunting man and prey were always hunting each other. When the prey was strong enough, the hunter would naturally become the prey. Scared, Lin Fan's eyes darkened as he seemed to have made up his mind. With a deep roar, his aura surged once more as a terrifying sword was shot through the void like a sharp blade. Daikin, even if he was afraid, he still had to fight on. He didn't believe that Niet Tian could really control that terrifying power. Humph! Niet Tian felt the vibrations of the sword will and snickered. Lin Fan, I thought you were smart. I didn't think you would be as stupid as them. You don't even realize the difference between you and me. As soon as he spoke, he stepped forward. Instantly, starlight flashed and, like a tsunami, swallowed the sword will in the air. How could this be? Lin Fan's body trembled, and he stumbled back a few steps. Facing Niet Tian right now, he felt like the latter was like a vast ocean, endless and strong enough to drown everything. It's over, Niet Tianling said coldly. The sword in the sky sliced through the air, and the sword will poured out of it. A shadow of a sword fell and pressed down on Lin Fan. Lin Fan's eyes widened. Before he could react, he was flung backwards, leaving a bloody trail in the air. The shocking scene caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air, and their expressions became sluggish. Who? They couldn't believe that Lin Fan, who had the absolute advantage, was swept away by Niet Tian's sword. This is impossible. Ren Huang stood in the air and was numb for a long time. Finally, he squeezed out 4 words from the gaps of his teeth. In front of him was the most unacceptable reality. Lin Fan had lost. Lin Fan's defeat meant that Run Huang and the Human Emperor's Hall had lost. How did the silver-haired swordsman, who didn't attract his attention, turn the tables? At this moment, Run Huang had an illusion that Nie Tian was invincible. Nie Tian Guang glanced at the crowd and didn't say anything. He moved and left. So after a long time, the judge finally reacted and announced Nie Tian's victory. Huang, the final battle of the Quan contention, ended just like that. The final result was unexpected. At the same time, everyone felt that it wasn't enough. Guang, some people looked at Nie Tian with unconcealable respect and fear in their eyes. Such a young swordsman, the power he displayed was almost limitless. His potential was unimaginable. Nie Tian, how are you? Nie Tian landed and came to Yin Fengwu's side. The latter was very nervous and asked with a trembling voice, "I'm fine." Nie Tian forced a smile and replied indifferently. He knew very well what he was going through. When he opened the vein sealing restriction, he had already made his choice, and, at the same time, he was prepared for the worst. He wanted to win. Other than that, he didn't care about anything else. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart looked at Nie Tian and could already tell that something bad had happened. He wanted to ask, but held back in the end. Nie Tian, let's talk. At that moment, a figure landed on the ground and looked at Nie Tian with a playful look in his eyes. Nie Tian wasn't surprised to see Mori Shire. The vein sealing restriction was left by Mori Shire. Naturally, no one knew better than him what kind of power it was. Nie Tian. Yin Fengwu stared at Armageddon with a grim face. Clearly, he was on guard. Big brother, it's okay. He won't kill me, at least not now. Nie Tian waved his hand and signaled Yin Fengwu to relax and smiled faintly. Mori Shire left the vein sealing restriction to control him, not to kill him. Nie Tian and the 12 Armageddon figures sped into action and soon arrived at a secluded mountain valley. Nie Tian, now you understand what the bloodline sealing restrictive spell is, don't you? Doomsday looked at Nie Tian with the complacency of a victor. Do you think you can control me with the vein sealing restriction? Nie Tian wasn't nervous. Instead, he laughed. The vein sealing restriction is opened. You have at most 3 years to live. Aren't you afraid? Mori Shire obviously didn't expect Nie Tian to be so calm and couldn't help but frown. There is only death in life. Nie Tian responded calmly with his hands behind his back, showing an open-minded attitude. There is only death. Mori Shire smiled and said cold. But you, Nie Tian, are not the kind of person who will wait for death. Of course I won't wait for death. Nie Tian also smiled and said, 3 years is more than enough for me. I believe that I can find a way to break the bloodline sealing restrictive spell. Chapter 43:24. Mori Shire's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Nie Tian with a horrified expression. The vein sealing restriction is indeed powerful. I can't stop burning my life right now. However, if you think that you can completely control me with the vein sealing restriction, you underestimate me too much. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said with an indifferent expression, Nie Tian, I really didn't expect that you still have the ability to resist the vein sealing restriction. Mori Shire calmed down and said in a deep voice, but in your current state, your martial body is rapidly aging. This is something you can't stop. Who in this world can stop the vein sealing restriction? I'm the only one who is forbidden. Even so, you can't control me. Nie Tianling smiled coldly and was very domineering. Just now, Mori Shire wanted to control the vein sealing restriction and let Nie Tian experience the true pain of the vein sealing restriction. Unfortunately, he found that Nie Tian could actually resist him. However, Nie Tian could only resist a little at this time, so he wouldn't be enslaved by Mori Shire. If he wanted to completely get rid of the vein sealing restriction, he still had a long way to go. 3 things. As long as you help me with 3 things, I will help you remove the vein sealing restriction. How about it? Mori Shire was silent for a moment and said in a deep voice. He originally thought that he could completely control Nie Tian, But now he could only let Nyetian help him with 3 things. This was the biggest concession he could make. Mori Shire, it seems that you still don't understand me. Nyetian looked at Mori Shire and couldn't help but smile. Between you and me, we can only be partners. It's impossible for you to threaten me. Mori Shire's eyes slightly narrowed. Obviously, he didn't expect that Nyetian would have such a reaction. He was silent again and asked, "Then what do you want? If you want me to help you with something, I can, but it must be a mutual help." Nyetian's expression eased and said lightly, "What do you want?" Mori Shire frowned and asked unhappily, "I do things for you, and you do things for me." Nyetian replied with a faint smile. "What do you want me to do?" Mori Shire's face darkened. "The swordsman called Cold Phoenix Ji Shui. You should have a way to deal with her injuries, right?" Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Mori Shire with a playful expression. He had long discovered that Mori Shire was paying special attention to Lung Huang Ji Shui, as if he was plotting something. That person from the 3 Lives clan? Mori Shire's eyes trembled as he asked in surprise. "You want me to save her?" "Yes." Nyetian nodded and said, "As long as you cure her injury, I can help you with one thing." "Okay." Mori Shire looked at Nyetian for a long time, then finally nodded and asked, "What else?" "Help me kill someone." The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched, and a murderous chill surged in his eyes. "Ren Huang." Mori Shire's eyes darkened slightly as he asked directly. Nyetian nodded solemnly. At this time, they were in the Yellow Spring Holy Land, and this was the best time to kill Ren Huang. Previously in the Yellow Spring struggle, Nyetian did not manage to kill Ren Huang, and it was a pity. But Mori Shire was different. There was no one here that he could not kill. If Mori Shire was willing to kill Ren Huang, it would undoubtedly help Nyetian get rid of a future enemy. Umph. Suddenly, Mori Shire could not help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "Nyetian, I know what you are thinking, but let me tell you, even if I help you kill Ren Huang, it will not do you any good." "What do you mean?" Nyetian frowned and looked puzzled. "Do you think that the Ren Huang you see now is the real Ren Huang?" Apocalypse smiled again and said, "If that's what you really think, then you're underestimating the human sovereign and the human sovereign palace too much." Nyetian's expression changed, and he asked, "You are saying that this is not the real Ren Huang?" "Of course not." Mori Shire smiled coldly and said, "He is just a puppet controlled by Ren Huang. The real Ren Huang is powerful beyond your imagination, and no one has ever seen him." "Why should I believe you?" Nyetian asked cold after a few seconds of silence. "You can choose not to believe me, but I can help you kill Ren Huang." Mori Shire did not seem to care and said, "But I have to remind you that if you kill this puppet, there will be another one, and it may be even more powerful. What do you think? Is it better to keep this Ren Huang, who you know better, or let the next more terrifying Ren Huang appear?" Nyetian looked at Mori Shire and tried to see through him, but he gave up in the end. With Mori Shire's ability in the Yellow Springs Holy Land, killing Ren Huang was a piece of cake. There was no need to reject Nyetian. In fact, Nyetian found it strange before. Although Ren Huang was very powerful, even stronger than Yin Feng and Wuwa, he was not as powerful as he had expected. Based on his observation, Ren Huang was stronger than Yin Feng and Wuwa, but they were still at the same level. If they fought to the death, the odds of winning should be 70 to 30%. Ren Huang was the supreme leader of the Human Emperor Palace, and the Human Emperor Palace was a super existence that had secretly ruled the Holy World for countless years. Obviously, Ren Huang's strength was not enough. Yin Feng and Wuwa could fight Ren Huang and the Ghost Clan. Who knew if other hidden families had old monsters like Yin Feng and Wuwa? As the supreme existence of the Human Emperor Palace, Ren Huang should have strength far beyond the ordinary peak to ensure that the Human Emperor Palace would not fall. Thinking about it this way, Ren Huang was indeed a little weak. What Mori Shire said matched Nyetian's previous doubts, so he could only believe it. "Do you have any other requests?" Mori Shire asked coldly when he saw Nyetian did not speak. "Tell me your conditions." Nyetian looked up and glanced at Mori Shire and responded indifferently. Mori Shire's expression changed slightly. He took a deep breath and said, "Nye Tian, have you heard of the Dark Realm?" "Dark Realm?" Nye Tian frowned and shook his head. Mori Shire nodded slightly and said, "The All-Heaven Saints world is very large. A very long time ago, when the All-Heaven Saints world was still a single entity, there was another world below it. Because it has always been under the shadow of the All-Heaven Saints world, the All-Heaven Saints world has always existed. It's called the Dark Domain. When the All-Heaven Sacred world collapsed back then, the hidden domain below was also affected and collapsed. It shattered along with the All-Heaven Sacred world," said Jianshun. "Right now, the Dark Realm is roughly divided into 12 regions. One of them is called the Seventh Night. Rumor has it that it was once the center of the Dark Realm, and some secrets are buried there. You want to go to the Seventh Night?" Nye Tian frowned and asked cautiously. Mori Shire made it sound simple, but from his point of view, this matter was not normal. "Yes." Mori Shire nodded solemnly and said, "I'm going there to find the lost relic of the Yellow Spring race." Nye Tian frowned again and said in surprise, "The Yellow Spring clan once lived in the Dark Realm?" Chapter 43:25. When Nye Tian heard Mori Shire mention Lung Huang Jishue, he couldn't help but feel nervous. "I naturally have my reasons for letting her go, but I can't tell you now." Mori Shire smiled sinisterly. "Moreover, her injuries are not trivial. Even I can only delay it temporarily. If you want to completely cure it, she must come with us to the Dark Domain." Nye Tian frowned and hesitated. Even though Mori Shire promised to save Lung Huang Jishue, he couldn't make the decision for her, whether to go to the Dark Domain or not. It was up to Lung Huang Jishue. "Don't worry, she can't wait to go with us." Mori Shire saw through Nye Tian's thoughts and said with a faint smile. Nye Tian nodded. He felt that with him following her, it wouldn't be easy for Mori Shire to do anything to Lung Huang Jishue even if he wanted to. "That demon-masked man, do you know anything about him?" Suddenly, Nye Tian thought of the demon-masked swordsman who fought against him before and couldn't help but look at Mori Shire. That demon-masked man possessed Tang 13 and almost took Nye Tian's life, but he managed to escape in the end. This made Nye Tian very angry. Nye Tian guessed that the demon-masked man should be related to the Ghost Clan, and Mori Shire, as someone from the Yellow Springs bloodline, might know something about it. "I saw through his identity, but I didn't expect that these old guys are still alive." Mori Shire laughed, looking like he didn't care at all. "Old guys." Nye Tian frowned, wanting Mori Shire to continue. But Mori Shire didn't intend to explain in detail. He only said, "Nye Tian, I can also save your friend, but if I help, you will owe me a big favor. If you can save Tang 13, I will promise you one more thing." Nye Tian's eyes were heated as he spoke in a heavy tone. "Okay." Mori Shire laughed and said, "Then let's go." "Go." Nye Tian couldn't help but be taken aback. "Where?" "Of course it's the Dark Realm," Mori Shire said with a raised eyebrow. "Now." Nye Tian was stunned once again. Was he not going to participate in the sword comprehension in the Netherworld? The monument of the Underworld is gone, and the sword intent in the flower of the Underworld has weakened too much. There's no point in comprehending the sword in the Underworld anymore, Mori Shire said with a faint smile. "This?" Nye Tian was stunned. If there was no meaning in comprehending the Yellow Spring sword, then wouldn't the Yellow Spring struggle be for nothing? Let those idiots stay here to comprehend the sword. When the sacred ground of Yellow Springs closes, they will naturally leave. You go and inform your friends first. I will go and find that person from the Three Lives clan, Mori Shire said and moved. Nye Tian had a helpless expression. He first went to find Infomwa, Scarlet Life Dan Xin, and the others, then told them about the situation and suggested that they leave immediately. Since there was no point in comprehending the sword and the Yellow Spring sword, staying here would only increase the danger. Even if this human sovereign was just a puppet, his strength was stronger than Infomwa and posed a great threat to them. Although Infomwa and the others were shocked, after thinking about it, they still decided to leave with Nye Tian. Nye Tian and the others quickly met up with Mori Shire and Lung Huang Jishue. Before the human sovereign and the others noticed, they had already left the sacred ground of Yellow Springs. After leaving the sacred ground of Yellow Springs, Tion and the others returned to the thousand-fold ghost domain. Morishire seemed to be in a hurry and only gave Tion half a day's time. Tion, do you really want to go to the dark domain with him? Tion told Infongwua about the dark domain. The latter was very worried that Morishire would harm him. Big brother, don't worry. I am in a cooperative relationship with Morishire. He didn't kill me in the sacred ground of Yellow Springs, so he naturally won't kill me now. Tion smiled faintly, looking very calm. But your physical condition... Infongwua looked a little nervous. He wanted to say something, but stopped. Morishire will help me temporarily stop the life ignition. I am confident that I will be able to control the vein sealing restrictions soon. Tion smiled again, his eyes showing strong confidence. Sigh. Infongwua sighed and patted Tion's shoulder. He didn't say anything more. He knew that Tion had done too much for the Ghost Clan. The Ghost Clan had lost too much money to Tion. Big brother, please take care of Chinya. Tell her that I will come to find her when I return from the dark domain. Tion nodded with a smile and prepared to leave. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and Yu Jingchun didn't say anything more. They just quietly watched Tion's back disappear. Gazing at Tion's back, the Crimson Life Loyal Heart couldn't help but ask with a frown, Senior, what on earth is that dark realm that Tion mentioned? How come I've never heard of it? Sigh. Infongwua didn't answer. Instead, he let out a long sigh. I didn't expect that after so many years, the dark domain will finally surface. Perhaps some things are already destined. No matter what, it will happen in the end. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart saw Infongwua like this and became even more curious. However, it didn't ask anymore. Tion bid farewell to Infongwua and the others and immediately met up with Morishire. Lunghuang Jishui stood beside Morishire. Her face was cold like a frozen mountain. There was no expression in her eyes. However, her complexion was much better than before. Her aura was also very stable. Tion didn't even know when Morishire saved Lunghuang Jishui. Thank you. Facing Lunghuang Jishui again, Tion was slightly embarrassed. He nodded and thanked her. Of course, he thanked her for Linfan. If it wasn't for Lunghuang Jishui, Tion wouldn't have known that Linfan was a dual sword user. Although this information didn't help him much in the subsequent battles, Lunghuang Jishui did her best, so he should thank her. More importantly, Tion understood that Lunghuang Jishui had never forgotten about him. Let's go. Lunghuang Jishui's face was cold. She just nodded and said, Don't worry, my formation is still a bit lacking. Morishire shook his head slightly. Then, he moved his palms together. Suddenly, two waves of ghost energy filled the air. In the void, it condensed into a small space-time formation. Tion was shocked when he saw this scene. He didn't expect that Morishire could condense a formation in the blink of an eye. This kind of method was really incredible. Then, Morishire spent another half an hour perfecting the formation. Only when his forehead was full of sweat did he nod in satisfaction. He looked at Tion and Lunghuang Jishui and said with a smile, You too, please. This is the space-time gate to the dark domain. Tion frowned and asked cautiously. Chapter 43:26. When Tion saw Lunghuang Jishui stepping into the array, his expression changed. He didn't have time to think and followed her into the array. The 12 apocalypses followed closely behind, their figures disappearing into the formation. The moment he entered the grand spell formation, Tion felt a terrifying soul power pressing down on him. Before he could put up the slightest resistance, his soul was shaken, and he passed out. After an unknown amount of time, when Tion opened his eyes again, the first thing he saw was a horrifying face, startling him so much that he stood up. The horrifying face was startled by Tion and immediately retreated, almost falling down. Tion steadied himself and finally had the chance to see the thing in front of him clearly. This thing was more than a meter tall. At first glance, it looked like a monkey, but it had no fur and its face was very smooth, almost like a 10-year-old child. Its face was also very similar to a human's, but it had 3 eyes and its ears were very big. When it moved, it could almost cover its face. What is this thing? Nyetian let out a long breath and couldn't help but smile bitterly. This thing looked ugly, but it wasn't dangerous. It was probably curious just now, so it lay next to Nyetian to look. Woo, 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 woo. The big-eared monkey seemed to understand Nyetian's words and mumbled, but he didn't know what it was saying. Fat, have you seen this thing before? Nyetian couldn't help but become even more curious and asked Fat Cat. No. Fat Cat responded and didn't say anything else. He was taking care of Tang 13 and really didn't have time to care about Nyetian. Although Mori Shire promised to save Tang 13, he didn't do it directly. Instead, he said that he would have a chance to let Tang 13 recover after reaching the Dark Domain. Share. Nyetian sighed and suddenly thought of Lung Huang Ji Shue. He couldn't help but exclaim and immediately looked around, but only saw a field of rocks and thorns. There was no sign of Lung Huang Ji Shue or Mori Shire. Is this the Dark Realm? Nyetian looked around, confusion filling his face. He sensed the atmosphere in the surrounding space and didn't find anything different from the sacred world. He couldn't help but worry. Could it be that there was something wrong with Mori Shire's space-time formation and he was teleported to another place? But someone like Mori Shire wouldn't make such a mistake. It seems that I got separated from them during the space-time teleportation. Nyetian forced himself to calm down and said with a bitter smile, I hope they're not too far away from me. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome. The Dark Domain was so big. If the 3 were too far away, it would take a long time to find them. Let's search around here first. Nyetian thought for a moment and decided to search around first. If he couldn't find it, then he would think of another way. He glanced at the big-eared monkey and no longer paid him any attention. Since the monkey hadn't heard him, they could go their separate ways. Afterwards, Nyetian began a wide search in the surroundings. Very soon, he had checked a radius of several 100 kilometers, only to find that other than some rocks, weeds, and some short shrubs, there wasn't even a ghost. Strangely, the big-eared monkey kept following behind Nyetian and maintained a distance of several 100 meters from Nyetian. Clearly, he didn't dare to provoke Nyetian. Why do you keep following me? Nyetian just stopped and looked at the big-eared monkey from afar. The monkey stopped and looked at him as well, as if he wanted to walk over but didn't dare. Big-eared, if you want to follow me, you better stick close. Otherwise, you'll lose me. Nyetian laughed, then sped up, charging over 100,000 meters away. When he looked back, the big-eared monkey was still behind him. This guy is so fast. This time, Nyetian was shocked, and he couldn't help but exclaim. Then he tried a few more times and found that the big-eared monkey was not only fast, but also had great endurance. He could easily maintain a distance of several 100 meters between him and himself. Big-eared, come here. Nyetian stopped again and waved for the big-eared monkey to come over. The monkey could understand him and slowly approached. When he was only a few meters away from Nyetian, he stopped again, obviously afraid that Nyetian would hurt him. Since you can understand me, then let me ask you, is this the Dark Domain? Nyetian couldn't find Mori Shire and Lung Huang Ji Shue, and suddenly felt that this strange monkey might be able to help. So he asked patiently, Dark Domain. Big-eared monkey tilted his head and looked at Nyetian. After a long time, he suddenly opened his mouth and mumbled 2 words. You can talk. Nyetian was shocked and then overjoyed. He never thought that this big-eared monkey could talk. Then, the big-eared monkey suddenly shook his head and looked at Nyetian in a daze. Not, or you don't know. Nyetian frowned and tried to take a few steps forward. But the big-eared monkey was very cautious and took a few steps back to avoid him. Do you have a name? What's yours? Nyetian stopped moving forward and asked patiently. Big-eared monkey shook his head again and then stretched out his 2 hands and waved them in front of Nyetian. What do you mean? Nyetian was confused. Was this big-eared monkey asking him for something? Woo woo woo. Big-eared monkey seemed to be a little anxious and pointed at himself, then at Nyetion, and then waved his hands again. You want me to open my hands? Nyetion slowly reacted and opened his hands. Yes, yes. Big-eared monkey nodded and then walked over in small steps. Nyetion did not dare to move, afraid of scaring him. Big-eared monkey quickly moved to Nyetion's side and quickly patted Nyetion's palm and then retreated. Nyetion, then a strange thing happened. Big-eared monkey suddenly pointed at Nyetion and said his name. Nyetion's face changed, and he was quite surprised. Could it be that this big-eared monkey could receive information from people when it touched them? Nyetion calmed himself down and nodded. Big-eared monkey then patted Nyetion's palm a few more times, and seeing that the latter did not have any intention of hurting him, he finally relaxed. He placed both his paws on Nyetion's hand and carefully felt it for a while. Nyetion stared at the big-eared monkey and waited for the latter to say something. Nyetion, this is the hidden realm. Big-eared monkey's lips twitched a few times, and then he spoke a clear and complete sentence. Nyetion gulped, and his heart was filled with shock. This little thing had only touched his hand for a while, and not only had it received his information, it had even learned to speak. That was unbelievable. To think that there was such a miraculous existence in this world. How strange. Have you seen my friends? Nyetion suppressed the shock in his heart and asked with a smile. Big-eared monkey shook his head and said, I know where they are. I can take you there. Chapter 43:27. Nyetion furrowed his brows and followed her. The big-eared monkey moved like lightning, his speed extremely fast. Even though Nyetion was running with all his might, he was still left far behind. The big-eared monkey was very smart. When he could no longer see Nyetion, he stopped and waited for a while. Then, after flying for a few hundred miles, Nyetion could not help but wonder if the big-eared monkey knew where Mori Shire and the others were. Why was there no trace of them after walking for so long? Quick, catch up. The big-eared monkey was very excited, and as if he had seen through Nyetion's doubts, he shouted. Although Nyetion was confused, he still followed. Soon, the man and the monkey flew hundreds of kilometers away. Only then did Nyetion see a vast plain in front of them, where a huge, ancient-looking city stood majestically, like a colossal beast lying on the boundless earth. Could it be that Mori Shire and Lung Huang Jishue are in that city? Nyetion frowned, guessing. He did not know how much time had passed since he fainted in the space-time array. Perhaps Mori Shire had woken up earlier than him and came here before him. Almost there, almost there. The closer they got to the giant city, the more excited the big-eared monkey became. But at this moment, Nyetion suddenly felt a gust of cold wind behind him, causing him to shiver involuntarily. He turned around abruptly, and what he saw stunned him. High up in the sky, 3 giant black snakes were hundreds of meters long, flying in the air like giant dragons. But behind the 3 giant snakes was a giant black iron coffin. It was as black as the night, carved with ancient and profound runes. It was constantly emitting a black aura, and there was a smell of decay. Nyetion was stunned, and it took him a few seconds to react. Why would these 3 giant snakes be pulling a giant coffin? Difficult, what was inside the coffin? Or was there someone inside? The coffin was dozens of meters long, so it shouldn't be a person inside. It should be something very big. But what was it that needed to be stored in a giant coffin? At that moment, the 3-headed snake had already arrived above Nyetion's head. Immediately, the coldness in the surroundings became intense, making Nyetion feel like he had fallen into an ice cavern. Nyetion, let's go, let's go. Unbeknownst to him, Big-Eared Monkey had actually run behind Nyetion, looking extremely nervous as he whispered to Nyetion. What's wrong? Nyetion frowned. Why was Big-Eared Monkey so flustered? It was as if he had seen something really scary. But when Big-Eared Monkey first saw Nyetion, he was also very afraid, so his reaction now was normal. Boom! However, at this moment, a rumbling sound suddenly came from above, following which the giant coffin actually stopped and floated in the air before slowly standing upright. Tion's expression couldn't help but change because this scene was too strange. When the giant coffin stood upright, it gave him the feeling that someone was looking down at him. He could even faintly feel that there was a pair of eyes inside the coffin. Whoosh! Then the giant coffin suddenly moved. Like a sharp sword, it fell straight down. In an instant, the giant coffin was surrounded by black chi, and the sky turned dark. "Back off," Tion said in a low voice. He turned around abruptly, only to realize that big-eared monkey was nowhere to be found. He, without hesitation, the sword in the sky attacked. With one slash, the sword shone brightly, and the dark sky seemed to be split open. The darkness was like waves in the sea. Bang! In the next instant, a muffled explosion sounded, and the giant coffin suddenly came to a halt. "Playing tricks on me," Tion growled. Sword will surged around him, and he slashed again. The light from the sword was like a waterfall, pressing down on the giant coffin. Hiss! 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 But just then, 3 black shadows barged in and broke through the sword shadow. It was the 3 giant snakes. One of them even swooped down at Tion. "You are seeking death." Tion felt the immense pressure coming from above, but he was not afraid. Instead, he sneered and swung his sword. Wherever the sword landed, blood filled the air. The giant snake could not withstand Tion's attack and was cut in half. The 2 giant snakes outside saw this and were instantly afraid. Their huge bodies moved, and they pulled the giant coffin and ran. "You want to leave?" Tion said with a cold laugh. He couldn't wait to see what was inside this huge coffin. His silhouette moved, and he slashed with his sword. The sword was like the sea, and it pounced. Giant, the coffin felt threatened, and black chi erupted, forming a giant hand in the air. It pressed down and blocked the sword shadow in the air. Tion steadied himself. He frowned and looked at the giant coffin again. It was long gone. "You sure run fast." Tion laughed. His body shook, and the blood on his body disappeared. When the giant coffin got close to him, other than the thick smell of blood, he also felt a strong, murderous intent. It was as if the thing inside the giant coffin had a terrifying, murderous intent. The direction where the giant coffin disappeared is where the giant city is. "I will go into the city now. Maybe I will see it again." Tion looked in the direction where the giant coffin disappeared and laughed. He did not leave immediately, but waited for the big-eared monkey to return. That little thing was very smart. Once it saw danger, it ran away. Passed after a while, the big-eared monkey appeared and quickly came to Tion's side. But he was not as excited as before. Instead, his head was drooping, and he looked a little unhappy. "Big ears, what's wrong?" Tion laughed, a little speechless. This thing ran away when it saw danger. "I am not angry, but you are unhappy. Tion, you are in big trouble." The big-eared monkey finally lifted his head and looked seriously at Tion. His ears were flapping nervously. "Big trouble?" Tion laughed. "You mean the giant coffin?" "Yes." The big-eared monkey nodded heavily. After hesitating for a while, he said, "That is the heavenly coffin of massacre. It is the holy relic of a nightless city." "Heavenly coffin of massacre?" Tion frowned and asked curiously, "What is it used for? What is inside the coffin?" "I do not know." The big-eared monkey shook his head. He seemed a little flustered and did not want to say. "Speak." All of a sudden, Tion took a step forward and reached out his hand to grab big-eared monkey's wrist as he said coldly, "I." The big-eared monkey was very scared, but he still stammered and did not want to say more. "Do you believe that I will kill you right now?" Tion's face was dark, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. "You will not kill me." The big-eared monkey did not fall for the trick and continued to struggle. It could sense what Tion was thinking, so it was impossible for Tion to scare it. "Even if you don't say anything, I will find out." Tion did not force it any further and let it go. He pointed to the giant city and asked, "That is the nightless city, right?" Although big-eared monkey was a little reluctant, he still nodded his head. Chapter 43:28. Big-eared monkey stared at Nyetian's silhouette, hesitated for a long time, and finally followed. About half an hour later, Nyetian and big-eared monkey arrived outside the city. At the city gate, two stone statues that looked like giants stood on the left and right. They were two dark beasts that Nyetian had never seen before. However, there were no guards at the gate, so Nyetian and big-eared monkey entered the city directly. Entering the city, Nyetian clearly felt that the air around him was filled with an eerie aura. Upon closer inspection, it felt like some kind of corpse aura. Big-eared monkey was obviously flustered as he followed closely behind Nyetian. Nyetian looked around. What entered his eyes were some ancient and huge buildings that looked very strange. What was even stranger was that the entire city was quiet. There was not a single person on the streets. Don't tell me this is a dead city? Nyetian frowned, and his expression changed. Empty, without any signs of life. If this wasn't a dead city, what was it? But the giant coffin from before was flying towards the city. Did it not stop in the city? Nyetian was puzzled. Suddenly, he thought of big-eared monkey and frowned. He asked coldly, "Big-eared monkey, didn't you bring me here to find my friends? Where are they?" "They there in the city." Big-eared monkey was panicking, and his voice was trembling. Nyetian frowned. It seemed that big-eared monkey was not lying. But this city was clearly empty. There was not even a shadow of a person. Were Mori Shire and Lung Huang Jishue really in the city? Who is it? Just as Nyetian was in shock, he suddenly saw a black shadow appear in front of him. In a flash, it disappeared at an extremely fast speed. But he saw it clearly. It was a human figure. Finally, someone has appeared. I don't care if you're a human or a ghost. You have to show yourself. Nyetian's eyes darkened. He made his move. Stomping on the ground cracked. Leaping into the air, he opened his demonic eye and scanned his surroundings. But the strange thing was, in a radius of several thousand meters, other than some strange houses, there was nothing else. Am I seeing things? Nyetian's eyes narrowed. His mental strength was already very strong. After activating the demonic eye, he could even see the slightest movement within hundreds of thousands of meters, not to mention tens of thousands of meters. Just now, that black shadow disappeared in a flash. Could it be that it was too fast and had already run to another place? Nyetian was bewildered. He carefully searched again, but still couldn't find anything, so he could only give up. Nyetian, let's go. At this moment, big-eared monkey seemed to have sensed some danger and opened his mouth timidly, begging Nyetian. What do you feel? Nyetian couldn't help being cautious and asked in a low voice. He knew that big-eared monkey's sensory abilities were unique, far surpassing his own. For big-eared monkey to be so nervous at this moment, he must have noticed something. Big-eared monkey shook his head, not wanting to speak. You don't have to be afraid. I will protect you. Nyetian knew that big-eared monkey was afraid and reassured him. But big-eared monkey still shook his head and refused to speak. If you don't tell me, I won't leave. Besides, I haven't found my friends yet. Nyetian chuckled and said softly. Then, he continued to walk forward. Big-eared monkey followed, not daring to stray too far. The closer they got to the center of the city, the heavier Nyetian felt the air around him. It was as if there was a giant graveyard in front of him. I sure want to see what this city is hiding. Nyetian's face was dark. He guessed that this city must have something to do with the giant coffin. After walking for a few thousand meters, Nyetian's face suddenly changed. He felt two cheese appear not far behind him, and they were tailing him. Perfect timing. Nyetian's lips curled up into a cold smile as he silently accumulated his sword will. Whoosh! Just then, a sound pierced through the air. Instantly, a ray of black light shot towards him. It was sharp to the extreme, and its killer's intent shot through the sky. Nyetian was not afraid at all. His body quivered and his sword will exploded, shattering the black light. What a strong sword will! Then, a gasp arose from the sky. Then, multiple rays of black light appeared and headed towards Nyetian. Big-eared monkey's face changed color. His body shrunk, and like an earth dragon, he drilled into the ground. You don't have any other skills, but you do have a lot of escape techniques. Seeing this, Nyation couldn't help but laugh. He originally wanted to protect Big-Eared Monkey, but he didn't expect this little thing to be so cunning. Since Big-Eared Monkey had the ability to protect himself, Nyation had nothing to worry about. It was time for a good fight. Without hesitation, he turned around and swung the sword in the sky. The sword slashed and shattered the black light. "You cowardly scoundrel, come out!" Then he shouted like thunder. The sword in the sky sliced across the sky. Like a tidal wave, it slashed forward. Bang! Bang! Immediately, two muffled noises resonated in the sky. Two black silhouettes revealed themselves and flew backwards, smashing into the wall beside them. Nyation's gaze locked onto the two black silhouettes. When he saw them clearly, his eyes froze. These two people were dark and skinny. Like two skeletons, they were draped in a layer of black clothing. He wasn't exaggerating. They looked exactly like this. If it weren't for the light in their eyes, Nyation wouldn't even believe they were human. "Young man, who are you?" One of them stood up. It was obvious that he was scared and asked in a cold tone. "That is the question I should be asking you." Nyation snickered and said in a low voice, "You don't know who I am. Why are you trying to kill me? You bastard, you trespassed into the Nightless City. You have violated the taboo of our clan. Of course we have to kill you." The man's eyes flashed, and he growled. "Clan?" Nyation frowned and asked coldly, "What clan are you?" The two were startled. They exchanged glances and then burst into laughter. It turned out that Nyation didn't know anything. He was just a slightly capable young man. "I am asking you a question." Nyation's face darkened. He stepped forward, and two surges of sword essence flew out. They transformed into invisible hands and grabbed onto the two. He said in a cold tone, "If you don't answer honestly, I will kill you. You bastard, you trespassed into the Nightless City. You are already a dead man. Even if you kill us, it will be useless." The two were not afraid at all. Instead, they laughed at Nyation. "Die." Nyation's eyes flashed, and his lips twitched. Instantly, sword essence burst out, and the two were crushed. However, there was no blood or flesh. Instead, they turned into black gas and dissipated. Nyation felt the black gas, and his expression changed again. This black gas was exactly the same as the one released by the coffin. Chapter 43:29. Boom! The huge snake opened its huge mouth, which was like an abyss, and attacked violently. The surrounding space trembled, and there was an ear-piercing, buzzing sound. Nyation immediately felt a huge pressure on his head. His face darkened. Then, he pointed his sword at the sky and used the reverse yin and yang again. The shadow of the sword was like a dragon, rushing into the sky. Bang! In the next moment, the two huge forces collided, and there was a muffled explosion. The huge force spread out and turned into waves of air that rushed in all directions. Nyation's body moved slightly. His feet sank a little, and the ground cracked. A strong cultivator. His heart sank, and his face changed slightly. Although he was only in the fourth heaven's calamity realm, his combat ability was already far beyond that of a normal Tianjue Saint Emperor. The person who came was able to make him retreat with one palm. It was enough to show how strong he was. "Good lad, your strength is not bad. Try my palm again." In the sky, a deep voice was heard. Then, an even more violent black gas spread down like rolling dark clouds, pressing down on the city. Nyation felt the space suddenly sink, as if he was imprisoned by an invisible force. It made it hard for him to breathe. Change of heaven and earth. But he was not afraid at all. He slashed out again and fought against the endless black gas. The sword was like a dragon. The shadow of the sword swept across the sky, tearing the darkness and dispelling the clouds. Nyation stomped hard on the ground and rushed into the sky. Sword will surged around him like a sharp sword that could split the sky. He stabilized himself in the air and finally saw the face of the person who attacked him. It was a horrifying face. The whole face was covered with deep holes like a beehive. It made people feel uncomfortable. His facial features were also squeezed together, making him look hideous. And this person's figure was the same as the two skinny people that Nietian had seen before. They were all skeletons. Very good. You can actually block two of my palms. The person's eyes were as sharp as blades. He stared at Nietian cold and put on the demeanor of an expert. Humph, Nietianling chuckled and said in a deep voice, "You're not my match." This person looked ordinary, but he was already a fifth-layer heavenly sense Saint Emperor. However, such strength wasn't enough to pose a threat to Nietian. Boast! That person roared fiercely and moved both of his palms at the same time. Black smoke rose from his body and curled up like smoke. Immediately, the smell of blood spread out. It was strong and pungent, causing people to have an urge to vomit. Die! In the next moment, he let out a low roar and struck out with his palm. Instantly, a black palm appeared like a rolling mountain, pressing down on Nietian. Nietian's lips curled into a cold smile. A pair of wings appeared on his back, making him look like a huge bird. With a flash, he directly pierced forward. Boom! Space suddenly shook. Nietian had actually passed through the huge palm and arrived in front of that person. You? That person clearly did not expect Nietian to be so fierce. He screamed in shock, but before he could finish, a large hand had already locked onto his neck. He could not speak at all. How is this possible? He felt his neck loosen and finally opened his mouth in shock. You're too weak, Nietianling said coldly. Tell me, what force are you? That person was startled and could not help but look at Nietian in shock. His expression seemed to be saying, You don't even know what force we are? Why are you trespassing into Nightless City? Speak. Nietian did not want to waste time. He exerted a bit of force and almost broke that person's neck. His martial body was so strong that even a fifth-layer heavenly sense Saint Emperor could not fight back once he got close. Corpse Demon Religion. The man hesitated for a moment and said coldly, Boy, the whole seventh night is the territory of our Corpse Demon cult. The Nightless Heaven City is one of the 7 sacred cities of the Corpse Demon cult. You're not a member of the Corpse Demon cult. Trespassing into the holy city is taboo. As long as you stay on the 7th night, Corpse Demon Religion will not let you go. The 7th night, Nietian's eyes trembled when he heard that person's words. He was pleasantly surprised. He remembered that Mori Shire was going to enter the Dark Domain on the 7th night. It seemed that he had not come to the wrong place. Has anyone trespassed in a nightless city recently? Nietian's lips twitched as he asked in a low voice. That person was stunned and asked, You have companions? Who are you? Answer my question. Nietian's face was gloomy and murderous. No. That person seemed to be a little angry and replied impatiently. Nietian's eyebrows furrowed as he felt somewhat puzzled. These people from Corpse Demon Religion did not seem to be afraid of death. The two people from before were not afraid at all when they were threatened. And this person, from the beginning to the end, had only shown surprise, not fear. Since you don't have them, your life is useless. Nietian did not want to waste time on this person. He sneered and moved his hand, breaking the person's neck. That person did not make a sound. His body became paralyzed and then turned into black gas and dissipated. Are these people not made of flesh and blood? Nietian had never seen such a situation before, and he felt even more strange. The two people he killed earlier also turned into black gas, just like the person in front of him. It was very strange. What kind of evil sect was this Corpse Demon Religion? Why did they teach their disciples like this? Nietian, let's leave this place quickly. Just as Nietian killed that person, Big-Eared Monkey came out from the ground and came to his side. He seemed to be in a panic. Big-Eared Monkey, how much do you know about this Corpse Demon Religion? Nietian did not care at all and asked with a faint smile. I don't know anything. Big-Eared Monkey shook his head, obviously worried about something. Since you don't want to tell me, I have to find out myself. Nietian didn't force him. Instead, he chuckled and said, Since you're so scared, you should hurry back. Big-Eared Monkey had brought him here, and that was enough. What happened next was up to him. He had a feeling that Mori Shire and Lung Huang Jishua must be in Nightless Sky City. Big-Eared Monkey shook his head again and did not want to leave. You. I asked you something and you don't want to leave. What do you want? Nyetian could not help but laugh and looked at Big-Eared Monkey helplessly. Nyetian, I know you are not from the Dark Realm. I want to leave the Dark Realm. Take me away. Big-Eared Monkey looked at Nyetian and begged. Nyetian smiled again. So this was what this family was planning. No wonder they kept following him. Sure. Nyetian nodded and smiled. But I need to find my friends first. So if you know anything, you better tell me. Big-Eared Monkey's face turned ugly. After hesitating for a long time, he finally nodded and said, Corpse Demon religion is the strongest religion in Seventh Night. The people in the religion all cultivate an evil corpse refining technique. This evil technique can refine people into human corpses. It is very scary. Chapter 43:30. Nyetian was stunned when he heard the Big-Eared Monkey talking about human corpses. Yes. The Big-Eared Monkey nodded, and his expression became even more nervous. So that's the case. Nyetian looked at Wei Chun, and finally realized why the people he had just killed hadn't been afraid to die. They were already dead. Nyetian, the people from the Corpse Demon religion are too scary. Let's leave this place as soon as possible. The Big-Eared Monkey looked at Nyetian and was extremely nervous. Nyetian suddenly thought of something, and his face darkened. Mori Shire and Lung Huang Jishua had not appeared yet. Could they have been captured by the people from the Corpse Demon religion? The people from the Corpse Demon religion were experts in refining human corpses. If the two of them were captured, wouldn't they be refined into human corpses? Let's go. With this thought in mind, Nyetian let out a low roar and dashed forward. The Big-Eared Monkey was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted and followed. Nyetian dashed towards the center of the nightless city like the wind. At this moment, he already had a bad feeling in his heart. Perhaps something bad had already happened. After a while, he came to a huge square. He could smell the stench of blood as if he had come to a cemetery. He frowned and his face darkened. No wonder the entire city was filled with the corpse chi. It came from this square. However, the entire square was very spacious, and nothing unusual could be seen. There was only a huge stone statue in the center of the square. It was a human-shaped statue, but the face was blurry, giving off a very strange feeling. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He then dashed towards the stone statue. While he was still in midair, he slashed out with his sword. The sword's shadow collided with the layers of corpse chi. Boom! But just then, the ground below him shook and a huge black hand appeared, shattering the sword shadow. Who is it? How dare you trespass into the Corpse Demon religion? Then a deep roar was heard with a strong, oppressive aura, causing the heaven and earth to tremble. Come out! Nia Tianling stood in the air with sword in tin around him. He pointed his sword at the ground and dashed over. Kaboom! Pung pung pung! The huge sword shadow fell like a small mountain, and the ground shook and exploded. Black gas surged into the sky. Nyetian was not afraid at all. The sword light in the sky shone brightly and broke through the black chi. It was at this moment that a black-robed figure appeared, standing there like a devil god, staring at Nyetian with a cold gaze. Very well, Nye Tianling said coldly, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Little bastard, you dare to behave atrociously in a nightless sky city. You must be tired of living. The man's face was cold. Every time he moved, the surrounding black gas became denser. You want to kill me? Let's see how capable you are. Nye Tianling responded with a smile, but he was slightly shocked. The corpse chi on this person was much stronger than the people before him. Moreover, his appearance was more normal. It seemed that he was not a human corpse, but a person who refined a corpse. Refining a corpse with a human was a sinister method. All the people from the Corpse Demon religion should be killed. You're not big, but you talk big. The person laughed. The black chi in his hand spread out and condensed into a strange flower. He then threw it into the sky, and it spread out like a dark cloud, covering the entire square. Barrier. Nyetian suddenly felt the oppressive aura, and his face changed slightly. He did not expect this person to be able to set up such a huge barrier in an instant. His method was strange. Kid, your martial body is not bad. You're a good material for refining a corpse. The person chuckled, revealing a row of yellow teeth. He then moved and struck with his palm. It had the momentum of a raging wave that pressed down as if it was going to destroy the heaven and earth. Nietion frowned. The sword in the sky came out and slashed angrily. It was like a roaring dragon, rushing directly at the strange flower. Boom! The next moment, the sword's shadow landed on the ground, but it did not break the barrier. Instead, it was absorbed. At the same time, Nietion was swept by the black wave and retreated rapidly. The person was surprised and then smiled. You're fine after taking my palm head on. It seems that your martial body is stronger than I expected. Since this barrier can't be broken, I can only kill you first. Nietion smiled cold. The sword essence around him exploded like a raging wave that seemed to be able to sweep everything. Such a terrifying sword essence. You really make me more and more interested. The person's eyes changed again, and he was shocked. He had seen many powerful swordsmen, but it was the first time he had seen someone with such pure sword essence like Nietion. In terms of sword essence, even the grandmasters he had seen before were far from Nietion's level. One sword godling. A cold smile appeared at the corner of Nietion's mouth. Then he slashed out with his sword. Sword shadows shot out with extreme speed and sharpness. The person felt the killing intent coming at him. His face changed color, and he retreated quickly. However, he was too late. The moment the sword's shadow flashed past, the sharp sword essence left a glaring scar on his face. Damn it! The person shouted. It was obvious that he was exasperated. After so many years, Nietion was the first person to hurt him. Plus, it was inside his barrier. Demonic corpse, come out. In the next second, he growled. Instantly, the ground shook and a silhouette broke out of the ground. His violent chi shocked the surroundings. Nietion furrowed his brows as he looked at the figure. It was a towering, 3-meter-tall man. The giant's muscles were bulging. If one didn't look at his face, he would look like a gorilla. What was more terrifying was that his body was covered with dark scars. They looked like scars but were carved with countless talismans that emitted terrifying chi. Roar! At this moment, the demonic corpse let out a low roar and charged towards Nietion. Nietion furrowed his brows and slashed out with his sword. Before the sword shadow could even touch the corpse demon, it was shattered by the latter's powerful force. Nietion's face changed color, and he retreated quickly. He didn't think that demonic corpse would be this powerful. But the next second, demonic corpse had already arrived before Nietion like a ghost. He raised his arm and punched. In a moment of desperation, Nietion punched back at demonic corpse. Bang! Two fists collided, but it was like metal colliding with stone. A cracking sound was heard. Then, Nietion's silhouette trembled, and he was flung backwards, leaving behind a trail of blood in the air. This guy's martial body is so powerful. Nietion steadied himself. Looking at his bloody fist, he was shocked. Even with his martial body, he was injured by demonic corpse. It was obvious how strong demonic corpse was. Chapter 43:31. Like a ghost, Doomsday 12 appeared next to Nietion without making a single sound. Nietion was taken aback. You're really here? Nietion was still very happy and surprised. He originally thought that Morishire had been captured by the corpse sect, but he did not expect him to appear at this time. Let's kill this guy first. Morishire's mouth twitched coldly as he stared at corpse demon not far away and said in a deep voice, Good. Nietion's figure shook and suddenly felt that his whole body's strength had increased a bit. Because of the existence of the vein sealing restriction, when Morishire was next to him, his strength would be much stronger. Roar! At this time, the corpse demon also saw Apocalypse 12. It let out a low roar, and like a wild beast, its berserk power erupted, causing the entire barrier to tremble. Nietion sneered and put away the sky sword and clenched his fists. He wanted to see how strong Corpse Demon's body was. Sure, Corpse Demon seemed to be angered by Nietion. With a roar, his huge body rushed over and punched as fast as lightning as if to break the void. Nietion felt the pressure coming on his face, and his face could not help but change slightly. But the next moment, he did not retreat and directly punched. Boom! Two fists collided, flesh and blood collided, and a burst sound was heard. The two figures, one big and one small, retreated a few steps at the same time. Nyetan stabilized his body, and his heart was shocked. The big man's martial body was really strong. If he did not use the power of the vein sealing restriction, he would have been badly mutilated by now. Roar! Corpse Demon seemed to be enraged and roared like a beast. The terrifying power around him kept surging, and his body became a bit bigger. Nyetion frowned. He saw that the strange runes on Corpse Demon's body seemed to be activated, and the explosive power kept surging. It was very terrifying. Enri 12 watched from the side and could not help but frown. No, however, he had no intention of making a move. He wanted to see how strong Nyetion was right now. Boom! The demonic corpse pounced over again, its huge fist pressing down, bringing with it a strong gust of wind, like a wind blade, filled with the power of tearing. Nyetion's face sank, and the Godfiend power in his body surged. Reverse Godfiend runes appeared at the corner of his eyes, and his aura changed. In the next moment, he threw a punch. The sound of the air being pierced rang out in the air. Then, a terrifying force exploded, and the Corpse Demon was sent flying. How is this possible? The horrifying scene made the people from the Corpse Demon religion scream as they looked at Nyetion in disbelief. Enri the 12th was also stunned, and he was shocked. He knew that Nyetion hadn't used his full strength, but he didn't expect Nyetion to be so strong. Judging from the strength displayed by Nyetion, his martial body was not any weaker than the Sky Martial Divine Ancestor. Even with the help of the bloodline sealing restriction, Nyetion's strength could be said to be shocking. He knew that he was only at the 4th level of Heaven's Calamity. Nyetion punched the demonic corpse back, and then his figure flickered. While he was still in midair, the fish shadows had already fallen like arrows. Bang! Bang! Then, there was a muffled sound, and the body of the demonic corpse fell from the sky, directly smashing to the ground. Bang! With the last sound, the demonic corpse directly smashed a deep pit on the ground, turning into a pool of mud. The face of the Corpse Demon religion person changed, and he directly froze in place. He couldn't believe his eyes. How can Nyetion be so strong? Enri the 12th also frowned and smiled bitterly in his heart. In the end, he still underestimated Nyetion. But at this time, he still felt that there was more terrifying power in Nyetion's body that had not been released. At this time, he was even a little worried that the bloodline sealing restriction might really be broken by Nyetion. Nyetion's martial body was too strange, and it couldn't be measured by ordinary standards. At this moment, Nyetion suddenly raised his head, and a pair of eyes locked on the Corpse Demon religion person, revealing a murderous intent. The person felt Nyetion's murderous intent, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble, and his heart was filled with horror. At this moment, he actually felt that he was wrapped in a bone-piercing chill, and he was close to despair. Next, in an instant, Nyetion's figure moved at the extreme speed, like the wind and lightning. The sword of sky in his hand struck out again, and with a slash, the universe changed dramatically. The person's face changed, and just as he wanted to resist, he was horrified to find that an invisible force had enveloped him, making him unable to move. He suddenly turned around and saw a pair of gloomy eyes staring at him. It was Mori Shire. The sword's shadow fell, and there was a bloody light. The person didn't make any resistance and was directly killed. Immediately, the enchantment above his head dissipated, and the space became much clearer. Mori Shire smiled faintly and looked at Nyetion with a playful look. "Isn't this what you want to see?" Nyetion laughed. How could he not know what Mori Shire was thinking? "Nyetion, you do have the capital to negotiate with me, but before the vein sealing restriction is lifted, you better not play any tricks." Mori Shire's lips twitched, and he said, "And your friend, before I do anything, he is still a dead man. You said that you have to wait until we enter the Dark Domain to find a way to save Tang 13. Nyetion, of course, knew that Maury Shire was talking about Tang 13, and he asked, "Now that we are in the dark domain, can you save her?" "Don't rush. I haven't gotten the thing that I want, and I can't save her for now." Maury Shire smiled, and he played it down. "What is it that you want?" Nia Tian was a little impatient, and he asked coldly, "Buzz." Maury Shire smiled again, and just as he was about to speak, he heard a roar from afar. His eyes trembled, and he exclaimed in surprise, "The thing I want is here." Nia Tian frowned, and he looked in the direction of the sound. He saw a giant coffin lying in midair, like a giant beast. The heavens slaughter coffin. Nia Tian's expression instantly changed. Wasn't this the heavens slaughter coffin he had encountered earlier? Coffin of slaughter, he saw the coffin of heaven heading towards the nightless city, and now it appeared. "You want this demon coffin?" In the next moment, Nia Tian's expression changed, and he looked at Maury Shire in surprise. "To be precise, I want the thing inside the demon coffin." Maury Shire smiled, and his eyes were surging with heat. "What is inside the demon coffin?" Nia Tian frowned, and asked in a deep voice. He had been curious since the first time he saw the demon coffin. What was so strange about it? But he never thought that Maury Shire would come to the dark domain for the coffin of slaughter. Chapter 43-32. Maury Shire flew toward the coffin of slaughter like a beam of black light. Boom! At the same time, the coffin of slaughter seemed to feel threatened. With a loud bang, a huge hand of darkness appeared and pressed down directly. Shire was not afraid at all. He gently raised his hand, and the power of darkness erupted, condensing into a sharp blade in the air, and directly pierced the hand of darkness in the air. Heaven's shadow had also arrived. When he saw this scene, his expression changed. He did not expect that after leaving the Yellow Spring Holy Land, Maury Shire's strength was still so terrifying. If it had been him, he would have been able to block the palm just now, but it would not have been so easy. He could clearly feel that the coffin of slaughter at this time, compared to before, was obviously more bloody and corpse-chi. It should be a lot stronger. Boom! Boom! At this time, in the void, two more beams of black light fell, like a waterfall, fiercely whipping over. "Too weak," Maury Shire sneered, and then a long sword as black as the night appeared in his hand. With a horizontal slash, it shattered everything. Immediately, his figure burst out again, and with a thrust of his sword, the sword shadow fiercely pounced out like a black snake. Bang! The next moment, the sword shadow fell, and the huge coffin of slaughter shook, and a dazzling crack appeared on the body of the coffin. Nia Tian's eyes narrowed again, and his expression changed again. The power of a casual sword strike from Maury Shire was so terrifying. It was really terrifying. "Who are you?" In the void, a low and hoarse voice sounded. It actually came from the coffin of slaughter, and suddenly the surrounding atmosphere became extremely oppressive. "The person who will take your life," Maury Shire responded coldly, and the long sword in his hand swept through the air. Waves of sword intent turned into black light and surged out, directly shrouding the coffin of slaughter like vines, firmly locking the coffin of slaughter. Kanto be able to control the sword intent so exquisitely. Maury Shire's talent in swordsmanship was extremely terrifying. "But this is like trying to kill me." "Too naive." A low voice rang out from within the heavenly coffin once again. After that, the gigantic heavenly coffin trembled in the air, evidently wanting to break free from the black light, only to discover that it was formed by sword intent. The rays were like maggots in one's bones, unable to be shaken off. How could this be? The deep voice was shocked and shocked, revealing an unconcealable horror. "Do you still think that I can't kill you?" Maury Shire sneered and said, "The items in the heavenly massacre coffin originally belonged to my race. You've occupied it for so many years. It's time to return it." "You." The person in the coffin seemed to have sensed something and exclaimed in shock. He paused for a moment before shouting, "You are from the Yellow Springs race." "Humph." Maury Shire sneered and said, "You're not too stupid. At least you didn't die muddle-headedly." "Impossible. This is impossible. Absolutely impossible." That person shouted, "The people of the Yellow Springs race died long ago. It's impossible for any descendants to survive. You rascals, of course you want the Yellow Springs to disappear. But my Yellow Springs bloodline will never die. As long as one of us lives, we will take back everything that belongs to our race." As Maury Shire spoke, sword intent emanated from his entire body. Immediately, the rays of sword intent became even more terrifying, tightly imprisoning the heavenly slaughtering coffin. Nieskai was confused as he listened. From Maury Shire's words, it seemed like the item in this sky coffin originally belonged to the Underworld Swordsman tribe. Moreover, the Underworld Swordsman clan seemed to have once existed in the Dark Realm. Brat, even if you really are someone from the Yellow Springs clan, so what? Do you really think that with your strength alone, you can overthrow everything? At that moment, the person in the sky coffin calmed down a lot and started to laugh wildly. Humph! Maury Shire sneered again. His eyes were as deep as the abyss, filled with killing intent. He said in a deep voice, "I am the son of Yellow Springs. My power alone is enough to reverse everything." Bang! 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 As soon as he finished speaking, he stabbed out with his sword. Then, the endless black rays suddenly tightened. The heavenly slaughtering coffin shook in the air and immediately exploded. Boom! 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 In an instant, waves of bloody, corpse energy spread out like raging waves. Suddenly, the void was filled with an extremely strong smell of decay, as if it wanted to drown the world. Nietion's eyes darkened slightly. He opened his demonic eye and saw through the heavy waves of air to the horrifying scene in the coffin. Void in the sky, endless corpse chi filled the air. Iron chains stretched across the sky like giant black snakes, and in the center of the iron chains stood a skinny figure. Several iron chains pierced through that person's body, but not a single drop of blood flowed out. Only endless black aura filled the air. "He's the one who just talked to me." Nietion was shocked. He had never expected to see such a scene in the huge coffin. But at that moment, Maury Shire stepped out and slashed with his sword. The iron chains were directly cut, and Maury Shire stood in front of the skinny figure. As expected of the son of Yellow Springs, the man raised his withered eyes and stared at Doomsday 12 without fear. Instead, he smiled and said, "Who would have thought that after so many years, the people of the Yellow Springs tribe would be able to return? Do you have anything else to say?" Maury Shire spoke in a cold tone, his entire body filled with killing intent. "Son of Yellow Springs, the outcome has been decided. You can't change anything." That person suddenly laughed wildly. His frail body was like a candle flickering in the wind, and he was on the verge of collapsing. "I can at least kill you." Maury Shire's expression was cold and murderous. He raised his long sword in the air, and a sword light flashed across the sky, splashing blood everywhere. He stretched out his hand and actually directly grabbed that person's heart. Nietion furrowed his brows. His figure flickered and flashed over. Then, the bloody corpse chi in the void dispersed and quickly disappeared. The blood-red heart in Maury Shire's hand did not bleed. Instead, it emitted a scarlet light like a flint. "This is his heart?" Nietion looked at the crimson object and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. To be exact, this is the replacement of his heart. Maury Shire smiled faintly, staring at the crimson bloodstone like he was admiring a rare treasure. "What is this?" Nietion frowned and asked. "The heavenly fiend bloodstone." Maury Shire nodded and said, "The murderous aura released by the heavenly coffin originated from this stone." Nietion's eyes narrowed and asked in surprise, "How can a small piece of bloodstone emit such a strong murderous aura?" Re 12 smiled and didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Nietion, do you know what this bloodstone is used for?" Nietion noticed that Maury Shire's expression was strange, and his heart sank inexplicably. "This is that thing's food." Maury Shire smiled evilly and put away the heavenly fiend bloodstone. Chapter 43:33. Nietion looked at Maury Shire in shock. The innate cursed bloodstone contained an enormous amount of murderous aura and corpse chi. What exactly was it that it needed to feed on such a thing? The evilness in Maury Shire's eyes intensified as he chuckled. Speaking of which, this thing has something to do with you. However, you don't need to know too much now. You'll naturally understand when you see the little guy. Little guy? Tian was stunned again. From what Maury Shire said, the thing that fed on the innate cursed bloodstone was obviously unusual and had something to do with him. However, he really could not figure out what exactly was so mysterious and strange. Tian, do you know how many people's blood chi and strength this innate cursed bloodstone has absorbed? Maury Shire looked at the shocked Tian and could not help but ask proudly. Tian shook his head and waited for Maury Shire to continue. If it's based on the Heaven Calamity Warriors, it's about 5 million people. Apocalypse smiled faintly and said, however, the origin energy of heaven and earth in the hidden realm is sparse, and the martial artists here aren't too strong. Thus, the blood energy in the Heaven Fiend Bloodstone is limited. Therefore, the blood chi in the innate cursed bloodstone might be more than 10 million people or even more. 10 million people. Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed and his face instantly turned gloomy. A small bloodstone that was only the size of a palm actually required the blood chi of 10 million people. It was simply too terrifying. The people from the Corpse Demon sect simply had no regard for human lives. Although these idiots from the Corpse Demon sect are a little inferior, they're still useful as they nurtured a bloodstone. Maury Shire was very calm and even smiled indifferently. Tian frowned. He was a little disgusted by Maury Shire's indifference. Tian looked at Maury Shire and asked in a low voice, your real goal is that thing that eats bloodstones, right? Maury Shire nodded with a smile. That belongs to our Huang Quan tribe. I'm only taking it back. When will you save Tang 13? Tian frowned and asked, don't worry. As long as we find that thing, it will bring back Tang 13's soul. Maury Shire smiled confidently and turned around to leave. Tian frowned and asked, where are you going? To find that thing, of course. Maury Shire smiled sinisterly and said, we have already obtained the heavenly cursing bloodstone. Soon, a large number of experts from the Corpse Demon sect will gather in this nightless sky city. If we don't leave now, are we going to wait for death? What about Cold Phoenix Ji Shui? Tian's face darkened as he suppressed the anger in his heart. The three of them came to the dark domain together, but Maury Shire did not care about Cold Phoenix Ji Shui's life at all. Why? Are you going to look for her? Maury Shire asked back. Aren't I going to look for her? Tian's eyes turned cold, and he was burning with anger. I asked her to come along, not to be a burden. Maury Shire sneered. And even if you want to look for her, how are you going to find her? The three of us should not be far from each other. She has not appeared until now, so there's only one possibility. The second possibility is that she has been captured by the Corpse Demon sect. She is from the Three Life clan, the Corpse Demon sect's favorite corpse refinement target. If I'm not wrong, she is most likely being transported to the Corpse Demon sect's headquarters by now. Tian frowned and thought about how true Maury Shire's words were. Cold Phoenix Ji Shui should be nearby, but it was unknown if she had been captured by the Corpse Demon sect. If you don't believe me, you can ask this new friend of yours. Maury Shire saw Tian's hesitation and laughed. He then stomped on the ground, and a figure leaped out from the ground. It was Big-Eared Monkey. Big-Eared Monkey looked at Maury Shire and looked very scared. He hid behind Tian. The Doomsday Spirit has turned into this now. It's really unexpected. Maury Shire looked at Big-Eared Monkey and shook his head. Doomsday Spirit? Tian was stunned and looked puzzled. Maury Shire sneered and said, Tian, you still don't know what this guy is. As he spoke, he flicked his finger and a black ray entered Big-Eared Monkey's body. Big-Eared Monkey immediately released a strange aura. Tian's face changed, and he was stunned for a few seconds. The aura he felt from Big-Eared Monkey was similar to the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. Don't you feel that this aura is similar to the 9 extreme chaos beast and night elephant? Maury Shire laughed and said, "This big-eared guy is the same as your 9 extreme chaos beast and night elephant. They're all heaven and earth elemental beasts." Heaven and earth elemental beasts. Nyetion's eyes narrowed, and he was shocked. So the 9 extreme chaos beast was a heaven and earth elemental beasts. This was the first time he found out. He had never been clear about the origin of the 9 extreme chaos beast until he met the night elephant of Demon Sun cultivation. He then found out that there was something similar to the 9 extreme chaos beast in this world. Xie Tianquang of the 4 ancient sacred clans had the power of the Thunder Ape, and the Thunder Ape was also a heaven and earth elemental beast like the 9 extreme chaos beast. Nyetion had never thought that the big-eared, 3-eyed monkey in front of him would have the same origin as the 9 extreme chaos beast. He is called the Doomsday Spirit. Although he is a heaven and earth elemental beast, he is a very weak one and does not belong to the 9 great elemental beasts. Maury Shire laughed and said, "His greatest ability is that he has extraordinary and strange perceptive power." Has Lung Huang Jishue been captured by the Corpse Demon Cult? He knows very well that some of them are captured by the Corpse Demon Cult. Nyetion took a deep breath to calm himself down and looked at the Doomsday Spirit. The Doomsday Spirit avoided Nyetion's eyes, but nodded in the end. "Okay, then let's go to the Corpse Demon Cult's headquarters to find her." Nyetion confirmed the whereabouts of Lung Huang Jishue and said seriously, "I wanted to go to another place first, but since you are in such a hurry to find her, let's go to Tiansha City first." Maury Shire smiled faintly and immediately moved like a black light. He disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Follow me closely." Nyetion glanced at the Doomsday Spirit and said in a deep voice before he followed. The Doomsday Spirit was stunned for a few seconds, but still followed. Not long after the 3 figures disappeared, a giant coffin appeared in the sky above the nightless sky city, overlooking the ancient city like a giant beast. At the same time, after Nyetion and the other 2 left the nightless sky city, they headed towards the main city of the 7th night, Tiansha City. The 3 of them were extremely fast, and it only took them half a day to reach an ancient city with a radius of thousands of miles. Chapter 43-34. Nyetion and Maury Shire looked at the heaven-fiend ancient city below, but their thoughts were completely different. Nyetion was thinking about saving Lung Huang Jishue, while Maury Shire was thinking about that thing. "Let's go in." Maury Shire's figure was like a stream of light, falling directly into the city. Nyetion and Big-Eared Monkey immediately followed. Tion Heaven Fiend Ancient City, the Corpse Demon Cult's sacred ground main altar, one of the major cities of the Dark 7th Night. The entire ancient city was gloomy and gloomy, as if shrouded in a thick fog, giving people an extremely oppressive feeling. Maury Shire did not feel uncomfortable at all. On the contrary, he was a little excited. Nyetion hated this kind of atmosphere very much, and Big-Eared Monkey followed him closely, looking very nervous. Ancient city, there was no one on the simple and wide streets. The whole city was like a dead city. Indri Shur walked at the front, as if he knew the whole city well. Every road and every fork was very clear. Nyetion did not speak along the way, but he was puzzled. Were they going to rush directly into the Corpse Demon Cult's main altar? Just even if the Dark Realm martial artists were not strong, since the Corpse Demon Cult could rule the entire 7th Night, there must be experts in the cult. The person killed by Nyetion should not be the top expert of the Corpse Demon Cult. Otherwise, he would not stay in the Nightless Sky City. But Doomsday 12, on the other hand, appeared to have a well-thought-out plan, as if he had already planned everything out. Very moments later, Nyetion and the others arrived at a small, dim alley and walked into it. "What are we doing here?" Nyetion saw that there was nothing in the alley, surrounded by high walls, and could not help but frown and ask. Maury Shire smiled mysteriously and spat out a word. "What are we waiting for?" Nyetion asked, looking confused. "Wait for the night." Maury Shire smiled again and said, "Don't you wonder why there is no one in this city?" Tian frowned and waited for Mori Shire to continue. The people of the corpse demon sect only appear when the night falls. Mori Shire looked into the distance and said, "In a few hours, the night will descend. At that time, you'll be able to see the real heaven-fiend ancient city." Tian was not in a hurry. He nodded and sat down cross-legged, waiting quietly. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sky became darker and darker, and night fell. Tian Mingxian could clearly feel that the corpse qi in the surrounding space was getting thicker and thicker, almost condensing into a solid substance, making people feel as if they were in a huge cemetery. Mori Shire, on the other hand, had a calm expression on his face. He seemed to be used to this kind of environment, fearing that an accident might occur. Yet Tian had the big-eared monkey hide within the 9 extremities. "He's here." At this moment, Mori Shire suddenly looked into the distance with unconcealable excitement in his eyes. Activating the eye of the heavenly demon, he could only hear a roar coming from the distance. After a long time, he finally saw giant coffins flying across the sky and coming towards him. High up in the sky, the giant coffins were like giant birds in the darkness, spreading their huge dark wings as if they were going to swallow the whole world. In the blink of an eye, the sky above the entire heaven-fiend ancient city was filled with heavenly massacre coffins. It was extremely spectacular. So this is the strength of the corpse demon sect. Tian's eyes dimmed as he felt an even heavier pressure. Of previously, he had to activate his godly demon body to kill a person with a heavenly coffin. Now, there were thousands of heavenly coffins. It was too scary. Moreover, there were a few heavenly coffins that were thousands of meters long. They floated in the sky like dark clouds, oppressing the heaven and earth. It was obvious that the martial artists in the heavenly coffins were much stronger than those that Tian had met earlier. But Mori Shire was still calm, and there was no change in his expression. Then, the heavenly coffins opened one by one. Strangely, many people walked out of the heavenly coffins and descended into the ancient city. Very soon, the originally silent street became lively. Tian observed these people in the dark and could not help but feel a little strange. They seemed to be no different from the martial artists in the all-heaven sacred world. "Let's go." Mori Shire smiled faintly. His figure moved and directly mixed into the crowd. Tian's reaction was a little slow. He actually lost sight of Mori Shire in an instant. Empty, the sky was filled with corpse qi. He could not sense and track Mori Shire. The two of them were separated just like that. Tian mixed into the crowd and followed the crowd forward. The people around him were discussing incessantly. The sect leader is going to take in a 9th concubine this time. Since the sect leader's wife died, he has not taken in a concubine for hundreds of thousands of years. What's going on today? Why is he suddenly taking in a concubine? I heard that the little girl is an outstanding beauty. She is a tribute from the nightless sky city. She was originally going to be refined into a corpse. I didn't expect the sect leader to take a fancy to her. I heard a secret. That girl is a member of the 3 Lives clan. Moreover, her background isn't small. 3 Life clan? That was impossible. Didn't they say that the 3 Lives clan was exterminated a long time ago? Why are there still people here? The words fell into Tian's ears, and his expression changed again. This wasn't the 9th concubine that the sect master was going to take, the cold phoenix, Ji Shui. His eyes trembled slightly, clearly burning with a terrifying flame of anger. His chest rose and fell slightly, and the sword will around him surged, as if he could not suppress it any longer. "Brother, are you all right?" At this time, a cultivator beside him sensed that something was wrong. He suddenly looked over and asked, "I'm fine," Tianling replied coldly. You're not." That person's expression changed, and then he cried out in alarm. But before he could finish shouting, his neck was tightly clasped by a large hand, and he could no longer make a sound. Without any hesitation, Tian exerted some force in his hand and broke the man's neck. At such a close distance, even some heavenly perception Saint Emperor cultivators would die if their necks were clasped by him. He loosened his grip, and the man collapsed to the ground, then turned into black gas and dissipated. No one around him noticed it at all. Tian followed the crowd forward and soon came to a huge square. People gathered in the square, and it was noisy. Clearly, they were waiting for the arrival of a big shot. Tian took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Buzz. About half an hour later, a low rumble suddenly came from the sky. Then, the sky seemed to be cut open by a powerful force, and a huge gap appeared. Then, as he spoke, an enormous black coffin appeared from within the gap. It was 10,000 meters in size, and it floated in the air like a huge ship or a mountain. Tian's heart sank slightly, and he immediately felt an unprecedented pressure. "Welcome, Sect Master." At this time, everyone shouted in unison, and then they all knelt on the ground, not daring to look directly at the huge black coffin. Tian frowned. He had no choice but to half squat. Chapter 43:35. When Tian saw the figure clearly, his expression changed involuntarily. The delicate little face was like white porcelain, chubby and very cute. His tiny body was less than a meter, and he walked clumsily and adorably. This was clearly a 6 or 7-year-old baby. Although he looked like a child, this figure was surrounded by a layer of dark black fog. His aura was not strong, but it was extremely terrifying, like an abyss. One look at him would instantly devour him. "He's the corpse demon religion leader?" Tian was shocked. He did not expect the dignified corpse demon religion leader to have such an appearance. Then, another 4 martial artists walked out of the coffin. Although they looked fierce, they were still considered normal people. The 4 of them had an extremely strong aura. They stood respectfully on the baby's left and right. Little the baby's gaze swept across the scene without saying a word. The atmosphere was very strange. Tian did not dare to move. He could feel the invisible pressure in the void. Even he found it difficult to bear. Why are there fewer bloodstones this time? After a long time, the baby finally spoke. His voice did not sound like a child's, but like an old woman in her 50s or 60s. Moreover, it was extremely sharp and piercing, making people feel very uncomfortable. All the scene was dead silent. No one dared to speak. Tian could faintly feel that a few people around him were trembling slightly, obviously very afraid. He guessed correctly. This baby was the corpse demon religion leader, the supreme existence of the corpse demon religion. "Nine Link City Lord, tell me why?" After a while, the corpse demon religion leader spoke again, his gaze locked on a skinny old man. Replying to religion leader, "Nine Link City is sparsely populated. We really can't breed bloodstones anymore." The skinny body of the Nine Links City Lord swayed slightly. There was a sobbing tone in his voice, obviously terrified to the extreme. "Is that so?" Corpse Demon Religion Master sneered. "Cult, religion leader, please give Nine Link City a little more time. At the next General Altar meeting, Nine Link City will definitely bring out the best bloodstones." The Nine Link City Lord sensed the killing intent and begged in a sobbing voice. "I remember that you said the same thing last time." The Corpse Demon Religion leader sneered again. Although he had lowered his voice, it was still very sharp. "You deceived our religion. You should know the consequences. Sect Master, I beg of you, please give me one last chance." The voice of the Nine Links City Lord changed as he kowtowed and begged. "My sect has already given you a chance, but unfortunately, you didn't grasp it. So don't blame me." The Corpse Demon Religion leader smiled sinisterly and raised his stubby arm in the air. An invisible force shrouded over and lifted the Nine Links City Lord into the air. Then, a bloody scene occurred. A gust of black chi appeared and transformed into a sharp claw, forcibly ripping open the chest of the Nine Links City Lord and pulling out his heart. The Lord of Nine Links City didn't even have the chance to let out a final shriek before he died on the spot, turning into a puff of black smoke that dissipated. Seeing this scene, Heaven's heart sank slightly. This corpse demon religion leader was indeed cruel and merciless, not even sparing his subordinates. At the same time, he was very curious. What did the sect leader need so many bloodstones for? Henry 12 had said that the heavenly ferocious bloodstones contained an extremely large amount of blood chi and ferocious chi, which came at the cost of countless lives. Of the heavenly ferocious bloodstones that appeared in the sky coffin of the nightless sky city were cultivated by sacrificing thousands of lives. Wasn't the corpse demon religion famous for refining corpses? Why was he so obsessed with the blood-nurturing stone? Next, at the next moment, an even more shocking scene happened. Only the corpse demon religion leader raised his arm gently, and a heavenly ferocious bloodstone came before him. He raised his head and swallowed the heavenly ferocious bloodstone. He ate it. Nietion was so shocked that he almost shouted. The heavenly ferocious bloodstone contained such a large amount of blood chi and murderous chi, yet it was swallowed by the corpse demon religion leader just like that. If this scene was anyone else, they would be very shocked. Could it be that the thing that Maury Shire mentioned was the corpse demon religion leader? Immediately, Nietion suddenly thought of Maury Shire's words and was even more shocked. The thing that Maury Shire was looking for was the heavenly, ferocious bloodstone. The corpse demon religion leader had just swallowed a piece of bloodstone. Wasn't he eating the bloodstone? But this was not right. How could Maury Shire be looking for a person? All right, today is a joyous day for our religion. If you don't want to die again, get up. The corpse demon religion leader seemed to be in a better mood after swallowing the bloodstone and said while waving his hand, "Thank you, religion leader." Everyone shouted and stood up slowly. "Madam, please come out." Then, the corpse demon religion leader seemed to be laughing, but it sounded worse than crying. As soon as he finished his words, an elegant figure walked out of the heavenly coffin. She was as cold as frost and extremely beautiful. Share. Nietion's pupils shrunk and his expression changed. The blood in his body flowed faster. The person that was called Madam by the corpse demon religion leader was Lung Huang Jishue. At that time, Lung Huang Jishue's face was ice cold and her expression was cold and detached, no different from usual. The people of the corpse demon religion below were all stunned. They had never seen such a beautiful person in their life. No wonder the religion leader took a fancy to her. The ninth Madam is the protector of the Three Life clan. Marrying with our religion is considered a marriage alliance between our corpse demon religion and the Three Life clan. From today onwards, when you see the ninth Madam, it's the same as seeing us. The corpse demon religion leader's sharp voice was heard again. Yes. Everyone bowed and did not dare to look at Lung Huang Jishue. Nietion suppressed the anger in his heart and took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. He was in the headquarters of the corpse demon religion and was surrounded by the experts of the corpse demon religion. Once he made a move, the outcome was obvious, and he did not know where Maury Shire was, so he could not be impulsive. Nietion had a feeling that Maury Shire had deliberately gotten rid of him. "Madam, let's go." At this moment, the corpse demon religion leader held Lung Huang Jishue's wrist like a child looking at his mother. However, the smile on his face was creepy. Lung Huang Jishue's gaze sank. Suddenly, there was a red light that flashed past her body. "Madam, now that you have fallen into my hands, you will not be able to resist." The corpse demon religion leader smiled evilly, looking at Lung Huang Jishue like a hunter admiring his toy. Cold intent emanated from Lung Huang Jishue's body, but she couldn't break free from the corpse devil religion master. Received with that, the two of them walked into the huge sky coffin. The small door was about to close. Whatever. When he saw this scene, Nietion made a decision in his heart, and he roared in a low voice while sword insight surged violently around his body, and then he stomped on the ground and shot into the sky. He didn't know what would happen after Lung Huang Jishue was brought into the sky coffin, so he could only fight. Chapter 43:36. Boom! In the dark sky, a figure soared into the sky like a roaring dragon. His sword intent was rolling like the sea, causing the surrounding void to rumble. The surrounding crowd was stunned at first, then they exclaimed, "Who is that? What does he want to do? He's not one of us. Stop him. How dare you cause trouble in the corpse demon headquarters? You must be tired of living." In the chaos, dozens of figures rushed up at the same time, releasing rolling black chi that filled the surroundings. However, Nyetian did not even look at them. The sky's sword let out an earth-shattering cry and pointed at the giant coffin in the sky, pressing down on it. The corpse demon religion leader's eyes sank slightly, but he did not take any action. For such a small thing? Was it worth it to have a plaque? Upon seeing Nyetian, Huang Jishua's eyes, which were as cold as an abyss, suddenly flickered. However, that flash of light disappeared in the blink of an eye. "You're courting death." A burly martial artist, standing behind the corpse demon religion leader, let out a low roar and stepped in the air. Corpse chi surged from his body, drawing a dark trail in the air as he slammed his palm down on Nyetian. Boom! The sword's shadow in the sky was crushed by the terrifying pressure, and Nyetian was hit, causing his body to sink for dozens of meters. The person who came was very powerful, at least a Tianju Saint Emperor. Not bad. That person could not kill Nyetian with one palm, and he could not help but be surprised. Nyetian stabilized his body, and his eyes were like sharp blades, locking onto the corpse demon religion leader. Kill him. At this moment, the warriors below rushed over, and waves after waves of fierce attacks came. The sky was gloomy, and there was no light in the surroundings. Nyetian stepped on the ground, and the celestial demon reverse pattern covered his body. The sword formation was immediately activated, blocking the attacks from below. Then, he moved again, and the sword intent on his body exploded into the sky like a raging wave. A mere ant. How dare you be so impudent? The eyes of the person in the air darkened. He was somewhat surprised by Nyetian's ferocity. He waved his hand, and a dark moon wheel appeared in his hand. He directly threw it out, and instantly, numerous moon blades appeared. They were as black as the night sky, and they slashed through the air with the sharpest killing intent. Nyetian's silhouette flickered, his speed as fast as lightning, dodging several moonblades. The astral soul armor on his body was activated as the Chinquin transformation was activated. Sword shadows howled, resembling dragons and elephants, as a violent aura permeated the air, wanting to engulf everything. Seeing this, the man could not help but frown. He even wondered if this young warrior was really only at the 4th level of the heavenly tribulation. "Heavenly King Ma, let me help you." At this moment, another voice rang out, after which a blood-red beam of light appeared in the air, dragging a trail of killing intent behind it. A vast amount of energy gushed forth, akin to tidal waves, frenziedly pressuring Nyetian. Corpse when the two heavenly kings of the devil cult attacked at the same time. The crowd below could not help but be a little excited. For this kid to die in the hands of two heavenly kings. He could be considered very strong. Demon sword incinerates the world. At this moment, Nyetian let out an angry roar and slashed out his sword in the sky. The sword's shadows whistled, and with a roar in the air, he actually blocked the life-threatening red beam of light. Poof, poof, poof. However, at the same time, several moon blades fell, directly tearing apart the astral soul armor, leaving terrifying wounds on Nyetian's body, and blood gushed out. However, Nyetian did not care at all. Starlight wings appeared on his back, and his figure was still rushing towards the giant coffin. At this moment, the corpse demon religion leader could not help but let out a cry of surprise, and his expression could not help but change. Kill! The other two heavenly kings behind him looked at each other and roared at the same time. Then, their figures moved together at an extremely fast speed, leaving behind several shadows in the air. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, two terrifying black lights appeared in the air. One was like a sharp arrow, and the other was like a long spear. The oppressive aura was extremely strong and incomparably violent, like a prehistoric giant beast with the power to break mountains. Near the heaven eye light dimmed slightly, and the power of the bloodline in his body erupted. The blood chi around him surged wildly, and the sky was bathed in blood. Heaven and earth alike reverse star kill. The corner of his mouth twitched, and starlight bloomed around him like a starry sky. The ancient martial arts technique was used again, and heaven and earth became one. Rumble, bang, bang, bang. The air rumbled, and the heaven and earth shook. Under the endless wild waves, Netion's body could not stop falling like a fallen star. He's dead. Everyone's eyes trembled violently, and their hearts were filled with shock. Under the joint attack of the four heavenly kings, the terrifying silver-haired swordsman was finally defeated. However, he only had the cultivation of a Heaven Tribulation King sage. If he was a Heaven Jew sage emperor, the four heavenly kings would probably turn pale. Umph! The corpse demon religion leader looked at the falling figure and snorted coldly. He turned around and was about to walk into the giant coffin. Even if he was extremely talented, didn't he still die tragically in the end? However, at this moment, someone suddenly exclaimed in an extremely sharp voice. In the air, the falling figure suddenly stopped, as if it was wrapped by a terrifying force, and it was forcefully stabilized. Sure, the demon religion leader's body paused, and he turned around again. His face finally became cold. He saw that the silver-haired swordsman stood up again, and the sword essence surged crazily like a wild wave. His aura was actually several times stronger than before. The four heavenly kings' faces changed, and they couldn't believe the scene in front of them. The four of them joined forces, and they actually couldn't take down a Heaven Tribulation King sage. Wasn't this a dream? What kind of power did this silver-haired swordsman have? Netion Lung stood in the air, and the blood chi around him burned. The vein-sealing restriction in his body was activated again. Around him, under the blood chi, a layer of blood mist appeared, and it was crimson and murderous. Come on, Lung said. Netion was like a mad demon that walked out of hell. His eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he looked like a god of death. Let's attack together. The four heavenly kings looked at each other, and they didn't dare to be careless. They moved together and attacked at the same time. Four extremely fierce corpse chi merged into one, and it actually formed a giant corpse demon in the air, and its roar shook the heaven and earth. It's a corpse demon again, Netion sneered. This corpse demon was much bigger than the one he had killed before, but he wasn't afraid at all. The vein-sealing restriction was activated, and what he burned was not his blood chi, but his lifespan. Giant A great price, followed by a great power. Roar! At this moment, the corpse demon roared, and its huge body moved. Its speed was extremely fast, and the corpse chi around it was like rain, killing everything in its way. One sword. Netion's eyes darkened, and his face was cold. He stabbed out with his sword, and the sword essence broke through the limit, drawing a sword mark in the air. One sword of 10,000 transformations, endless. It looked like an ordinary sword, but it seemed to contain infinite power, and it exerted the power of the sword essence to the extreme. Poof! The next moment, the corpse demon's body suddenly stopped, and it was pierced by the sword. It fell directly, smashing into the ground like a giant stone. The four heavenly kings' faces suddenly changed, and they all gasped. They were completely stunned.